Today is Monday, August 14, and we're beginning our work session for the Village Board of Trustees. We have a regular session at 8 p.m. Between 7 and 8, a work session. Just going to be 3 of us tonight because of vacation schedules. Paul Alvarez and I are here. David Vinjamori is on his way, but we'll get going with a couple of work session items. Come visit.
You got a real mob, huh?
The entire internet is listening. Welcome.
Well, my feeling is, and my wife would support me, I feel that if you don't make your voices heard in your government, then you have no business pitching about anything that happens.
Well, thank you for that. I agree. So just for the record, you need your name and address.
Lou Doria, 21 Foxwood Drive. As far as looking at what's been suggested for proposed as future development, my immediate concern or my local concern would be 88 residences at the Bank of New York. I don't know how people are going to get in and out of there.
88. It's
88 homes and 80 townhouses.
Oh, you mean up behind Foxwood?
Yes.
So that has not been proposed.
I know.
Yes, it's just
something that's
something is going to happen there, and we don't know what yet.
my position. My purpose for tonight is with development. We have to look long term at our resources. And when I say resources, I mean power and water. I've been doing a lot of research on the state's push to electrify as much as possible. We've set some guidelines, we've set some deadlines that some experts are saying are very unreasonable. We're supposed to be at 70% reusable by 2030, and by 2040, 100%. Some of the things that are considered reusable are windmills, wind farms, and solar farms. And they're saying in New York State, it's unrealistic to think you can put as many as you would need with all the forestry we've got, farmland that we have. We're certainly not going to put any of those things in New York City. We currently now depend solely on fossil fuels since the closure of Indian Point. One of the others is hydropower. And they're talking about pipelines coming from Canada. And some of the articles I've read, the hydropower depends a lot on reservoirs, where the power is going to come from with the water from reservoirs. Now, speaking of reservoirs, our reservoirs only hold so much water. You know, in my lifetime, I've never seen anything exceed full. There's no such thing as fuller. You know, once it's full, it
spills over the top and causes a different problem.
Lately, with the weather people, if we have 4 days of warm weather with no rain, they're already screaming drought and conserve water. So I'm looking ahead down the road. At my age, my wife and I are 75, and she keeps reminding me our ship is sailed. So I'm looking for
You look
my
pretty
children
good to
and my
me.
Should be on the ship, of course.
and my grandchildren's children.
Yes.
But my position is we shouldn't jump to build something on a space just because it's there and it's available. I look at the housing and I know that it's been controversy all over the place with Diffuse Street and the similar housing in Chappaqua, which gives residents a choice of either look out that window and see the sawmill or look out that window and see the trains. Just to put housing because that piece of parcel was there. Eventually, we're going to come to a point of saturation. And my feeling is that instead of asking, can we do it? The question should be, should we do it? We are in a position where if we're looking at it from our microcosm of village, then it extends out to the county and the state and other, eventually we're going to get to a point where people are going to say, where's all this power coming from? Now, looking from the perspective of making it total electric, that means we're depending on a grid that, trust me, from my experience in policing, we're not immune to terrorist activity. In my time with Harrison Police Department, we had 2 buildings blown up by terrorists in the 80s who were opposed to IBM's involvement in South Africa. That same decade, that same period of time, Union Carbide had an explosion by this same group called the United Freedom Front. if we're total electric and we're depending on this grid, they would cripple us by taking out our power grid. So to say, no, we don't want to do any gas, we don't want to do any oil, it's a nice thing to say, but also if you do some research into the hydropower, there's research that says it's not always as clean as people think it is. Sometimes the byproducts of doing the hydropower in a reservoir create more heat than the fossil fuels are doing. So to just say, yeah, we can have water coming in and that's where power will come from, is unrealistic. And the time frame that she set, or they set, the state has set, they're really saying is unrealistic. For us to be total 100% reusable power, reusable resources by 2040, that's not that far off. The other aspect is water. I noticed on our proposal, or the report that was done as what can be developed. We're looking at, with what can be developed, an increase of 4 million gallons per month, additional usage. Going from 23 million gallons a month to 27 gallons a month. By 2030, that would be up to almost 30 million gallons a month. I have to ask the question, where's all that water coming from? We're not making the reservoirs any bigger. We're not making them any deeper. We're not building new reservoirs as far as I know. And eventually it just, I mean, you've seen it. I've seen it in my lifetime. You go by, you see it down just a little bit, and all of a sudden they're telling you, don't water your lawn, don't wash your car, don't use water to brush your teeth, use beer or something to brush your teeth. But,
There's an idea. Right.
To the point where you have to question, will we always have these resources just to meet up with what we want to put up development wise? We drive around all the time and we see all these empty storefronts. So we asked each other, should we really be building something new when they're empty, that the ones that are there? And I realize that we're trying to incorporate some affordable housing, but to just put a house on a piece of property because it's there with what we're going to be paying electric bills down the road, I don't know how affordable it's going to be. I read a couple of things. This one individual, the Commissioner of Public Service, stated, John Howard stated, how much people's bills will rise over the next decade is a guessing game. I don't know about
over
you,
the
but that
next
doesn't give me a lot of
over the next 6 months, it's a guessing game.
as to how much it's going to rise. The individual who's the Con Edison individual, he estimated, Con Ed media director said customers are going to see 15 to 20% increase over 3 years in their electric bill. If I've learned nothing else in my life, it's that when someone gives you an estimate, you've always got to keep in the back of your mind that it's going to go above the estimate. So if he's saying 20 to 30, he's probably hedging his bets with 20 to 30. But for the other person saying it's anybody's guess, European countries that have relied on reusable, their energy bills have gone up over 300%. We have people in New York State, in the poor sections in New York State, who are leaving their ovens open for heat. So, our resources are not endless. We have to really think down the road and say, should we be doing this development just because we can? And that's the only point I'm trying to make there is consider down the road with resources.
So first off, thank you for that thorough clue. You've been digging into this and that's much appreciated. And I wholeheartedly ratify your first comment, which is get involved and take a responsibility to do so. And you've done that not only in this context, but in police initiative and many other things. So thank you for that. I just had a couple of things to say about that and about your comments. One of which is the reality is we don't own many of the properties that are under discussion, and private property owners obviously have a right to propose something, and they're not likely to allow them to remain dormant forever. So you mentioned the former Bank of New York site up behind Foxwood. That building, 140,000 square foot building, it's either going to get torn down and something else is built, or somebody will occupy it for some use. So it's not as though there won't be resource use for that building. we've been in many respects fortunate for all these many years that Bank of New York has used it for a what if kind of a scenario, and essentially 2 or 3 people working there instead of several hundred. So I would say the same thing about, you mentioned the Depew Street project here in Pleasantville and the one in Chappaqua that was affordable housing built adjacent to the sawmill. So both of those, the one here market rate with 10% set aside for affordable, the one in Chappaqua entirely affordable, have been, as far as I can see, extraordinarily successful in the marketplace. The Depew Street project is, by the report of the owner, fully leased in just a period of not very many weeks. So clearly the demand is there, and various people have various opinions about where the demand is coming from, but I don't think anybody is proposing to build housing or to build more commercial retail space without an idea in their own mind that it will in the end be viable for them. So a number of folks have said to me the same thing you said, which is, if we have empty stores, why would we allow new ones? It's not really a question of allow, as a question of what the market decides to do. So that's a much more longer story, obviously, about the community's goals in its zoning to try to foster a downtown service center and the synergy between various uses and all of that. But the core piece of it is no new retail is being built unless the people that own that property decide to build it. So there's that piece of it. And I just bring that up to make the point that although we try to create in the context of our zoning a vision of sorts for what might happen, in the end, all of us are subject, as is true for single family homes as well, to the decision of our neighbors about when to move, when to sell, when to buy, when to renovate, when to add, etc. So there's that piece of it. So on the energy and waterfront, you have looked at the FJ report that we commissioned, and as you obviously already know, our water comes through the New York City system, which, as an aside, is really one of the engineering marvels of the modern world. That this thing that was essentially a 19th century invention, this network of aqueducts and reservoirs to serve New York City, continues to serve New York City and Westchester and beyond, even though the population has massively expanded. It's really quite amazing. So certainly we're all at risk, as you reported, of periodic shortfalls in water. You see what's going on in the American Southwest at the moment, where big sections of Southern California, Nevada, Arizona are at risk of very serious quotas on their water use. Blessedly, I don't think that is anticipated here at the moment. And some would argue, above my pay grade, that the kinds of climate change we're seeing is producing the likelihood that our reservoirs are going to get filled up more often than they used to be. Certainly, anecdotally, that's recently been the case. So there's that, but certainly from the standpoint of our responsibility to make sure resources are available to support what's being proposed here, we absolutely have the capacity from the standpoint of the water system that we buy through our joint venture with Newcastle and the New York City water system to supply this water. And I might also add the other interesting point about water use is that in many cases, this might very well be the case for renovation of existing older buildings, new, more water efficient appliances and plumbing installations actually reduce some of the water that's being used in comparison to what's there right now. Likewise, on the utility front, obviously all the variables you just described are out there, and in fact, there's been wild fluctuation in our energy and electric and gas rates in the last year. Some of it affected by the pandemic, then the war in Ukraine, and global economics affecting the flow of oil. As you doubtless have read recently, turmoil with Iran and the Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of the world's oil passes. All of these factors creating instability in the prices. I agree with you that state's proposed deadlines for an entirely electric world seem unachievable. By the same token, I also think it's almost certain that the evolution of our future world will be more electric and less fossil fuel. And so who knows how that all works out, other than to say the good news about what might be proposed here is that it's subject to various energy codes that are likely going to make these new buildings, and certainly is the case for the several that have been built, far more energy efficient than the ones they replaced. Just totally guessing, and I have no basis to say this. I'm guessing, for example, the replacement of the buildings we're trying by once existed, which was a couple of retail stores and offices on the back, sort of a polyglot collection of things that have been built over many years. With the project that's there now, 20 some odd apartments, all of which obviously are water users. I'm guessing that the net use certainly of electricity is probably less than it was for the existing building, just because of the fact that it's taken 1950s stuff and turning it into 2020 or whatever year that was built. So all these things are factoring together, and we absolutely are thinking about it. Other than to say, as you probably also know, the governor's overall goal is over a 10-year period to see a 10% increase in total housing units statewide. That seems unachievable in areas that have low demand for housing, perhaps easily achievable in areas that have high demand and are willing to see it built. In our case, we've seen over the last decade almost a 10% increase in the total number of housing units, not a 10% increase in population, and during that 10-year period, a generally even or declining enrollment in the school district. So bottom line is, everything you said is important to all of us keep our eyes on. Some of it's above our pay grade, and some of it is the reality that, as you reported, our children and grandchildren are confronting a new set of challenges every decade.
Well, the point I was trying to make is I'm not naive. I know building's going to take place. My wife and I realize something is going into Bank of New York. To think otherwise is ridiculous. I mean, the property's there, like you said. People that own property want to develop their property. The only point I was trying to make with regard to resources is we're in a position now that we weren't previously in. You know, we had fossil fuels. And if we're going to depend solely on something that's going to be so difficult to accomplish, whatever people are putting up, they're not going to be able to afford to live in it, according to, you know, the reality of it. I mean, they put wind turbines in outside Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting pushed back on that because the people don't want to see them.
Right.
And
53 miles
the
offshore.
amount of square miles of water we would need for doing it out in the ocean is astronomical. Not to mention the square footage we would need on land for solar and wind. So if we're going to outlaw gas entirely, I mean, basically they're saying, look, you're just throwing the dice. If you build something, maybe you'll be able to put electricity into it, maybe you won't. So it's just something that we have not experienced before. You know, people were able to have a gas stove and have coal burning, and I understand about the environment. I'm not, in fact, where I grew up, we had a coal stove to get hot water. We had coal delivery when I grew up in White Plains. That's how far back I go. So I remember that. But what I'm saying is, it's got to be kept in mind when, you know, somebody says we want to put such and such here. Okay, you have to think, all right, what's going to power that? You know, who's going to be in it, first of all? The residences are going to be using the resources 24 hours a day, water, electricity. Businesses, they shut down at a certain time, they're using less than residents would. So you got to juggle what's going to be going into a certain place versus, you know, consider the resources available to service that. I understand fully what you're saying. People own property. You can't say to them, no, you can't develop your property. It's just thinking about other properties in the future that, you know, no, it is a piece of property. We don't want to. Now, I don't know. I know the moratorium's over. And I know one of the things that was based on pre-2017 building codes, right? And do
We
we
were
have,
examining in that study, the changes that were created in 2017 and their potential effect on the permissible development downtown.
now, do we anticipate, when now that the moratorium's over, changing our building codes?
Well, so there are several things that we have committed, and the ongoing discussion will be a public one. One of them is Trustee Michael Pepper, who's not here tonight, is interested in the notion of protecting certain views, particularly from the Memorial Plaza area towards the distant hillsides. David has brought up the goal of digging deeper into how we can produce more affordable housing. And we've also talked about some other tweaks in the zoning code that could potentially give us better control over the appearance of what gets built. That arises in part out of our planning commission / architectural review board and the concerns they have that they feel give them more capacity to push things in the right direction. So all those things are in play, but at the moment we've allowed the moratorium to expire without a change in the code.
I've
Well,
Luke, can I
Yeah.
ask you, before you leave, can I ask you a couple of quick questions?
Sure.
By the way, Peter, thank you. I really didn't have on my bingo card that Strait of Hormuz was going to come up today.
Well, that's it. We have a global view here.
So I think I'm probably a little bit on the same page with you with regards to the specific concerns about the Bank of New York property, although possibly for different reasons. My concern is mostly about where it lies within the village and the potential for either intense residential or intense commercial use there to sort of complicate an already difficult traffic situation, particularly, in the beginning and the end of the day. So, and I think for sure that's something that all the trustees share is concern about the disposition of that property. Having said that, what is in our control is limited, except so far as we have the opportunity to change zoning. That's where we would come into that. But the thing I wanted to ask you, I'm really curious about this overall perspective, because it's something we've heard from other villagers for sure. And looking into a bunch of the things that you're talking about, they're very common claims, and they happen everywhere in the country where there is any kind of development. But in New York in specific, it's interesting because, first of all, we know that, as Peter just said, we just did a comprehensive survey of our availability of emergency services, power, of water, school, seats in the school, all of that is fine. But also I looked at New York State and the metro area, and both of them are losing people. New York State lost 200,000 residents in 2020, the latest available year. So it's not, when we talk about people moving into Pleasantville, they're not moving from out of state. They're not moving from a different grid. They're not moving from a different place where they're using resources on net. I mean, of course, there are a few people moved from California, but there's people moving to Florida all the time. So in the net, when you talk about Pleasantville adding, for instance, apartments in the downtown area where we have allowed more development, talking about people who would be using resources most likely in the metro area anyway, which is the same water, the same electricity, et cetera. And I guess my question is, like me, you weren't born here, you came here at some point.
Well, we've been here in Pleasantville for 20 years.
So-
We lived in Hawthorne for 27
Sure.
years before we
Right.
came to Pleasantville. So we've been in Mount Pleasant for 47 years.
Which is, you're a little bit older than 47, so it's not where you were born, correct?
I was born in White Plains.
Okay,
You heard about the coal deliveries.
right, I did hear, I was waiting to see if you got the blocks of ice in the
I
bottom
was
of
born
the.
in White Plains where I've seen considerable change
Right.
from when I grew up in White Plains.
That would be
Right.
fair to say, yes.
And, my experience of development is living in a town not too far from here where the town tried to stop all development successfully. The developers banded together. They got elected onto the planning board and to the RTM, the representative town meeting, and then they ran wild. And that town is much more commercial than anything you would ever want to see in your wildest nightmares. And so my question is, where do you think that the balance should be? Should it be, if I live here now and I'm not an investment banker or a lawyer or something, and I have the average income and not an extraordinary income, and my mother is starting to get ill where she lives, and I want her to come and live where I can take care of her, but I don't have room in my house. Should she be able to live in Pleasantville? If my kid goes to college and comes back, should he be able to start a family here if he's not making $300,000 a year?
Well, what I feel on affordable housing issue is what we did. We went to where we could afford. We did not expect a community to change to accommodate us if we couldn't afford it. And, you know, I mean, we looked at other condominiums before we came here, and to be perfectly honest with you, what sold me on Foxwood was the availability of parking. Not the fact that I've got 30 trees around my building. So we went where we could afford to go. If I couldn't afford to live here any longer, I would move. I wouldn't expect changes made for me so that I could stay here. It would be nice for me to be able to stay here. You'd like for people to be able to stay here, but you go where you can afford to go. And that's you know, the supply and demand.
But it's part of this is in our control, right? It's not extremely in our control. We're tinkering at the margins. But what I'm saying is it's a choice, right? Our costs, I'm looking at Alyssa to make sure I don't lie. Our expenses last year went up about 7.5%. Your taxes went up about 2.5%. Sorry? I think so. Yeah. The gap in there every single year is based on the economic activity in the village. So when we do things like stimulate the type of, you're absolutely right, there's storefronts empty, but a lot of it has to do with what people want, you know, just like housing in commercial, they want specific things. And also bringing people, we know for sure the way that restaurants work is if you only go to them on the weekends, then they're very expensive and they don't last very long. When you start to have people on foot, meaning people who live in houses or apartments near an urban downtown small zone, they tend to flourish and they can be less expensive for everybody. And that in turn, less expensive places to eat leads to the ability of people who make a little bit less to come in.
The thing that I brought up about the energy is we in New York State are already paying 12% higher electric rates than the national average. If New York State goes forward with what their proposal is to create reusable energy, and it's going to cost money to do that, and the cost is obviously going to be passed off to the consumer. How affordable are we going if our electric rates are now going up to 15, 20, 30% more than the national average? People are not going to stay in New York. They're going to find a cheaper place to go.
Well, they may, but what I'm saying is we're losing people already.
We are.
So that's not, there's no difference between what you're going to pay for electricity in Pleasantville or White Plains or Hawthorne or anywhere locally.
I'm not putting it on Pleasantville. I'm
just saying, like, it doesn't affect our policy.
I like living here.
Yeah, but it doesn't really affect our policy decisions. I'm saying, like,
Right,
you know, we're
So
not.
can I just,
Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, a completely worthy conversation and happy to continue it. We got some of the things we have to do.
Yeah,
So,
you were nice enough to let me in
yeah,
on
so
this. and-
much appreciated. You're welcome anytime and happy to continue the conversation.
The only concern I have with Bank of New York is no matter what goes in there, there's only one way in and one way out. And if you tried to get out of Foxwood onto 117 during any kind of rush hour, you multiply that by whatever they put in there, and there is no other entrance. I mean, we used to be able to go out onto Washington
Nope,
Avenue.
believe me, I well know. I well know.
Whole family's house, right?
Yeah.
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 So, I mean, that's just a concern, you know, for
Yeah.
down the road,
it's-
because I find
mean,
that's
it's
still, like she said,
such
our ship is.
a funny
Out the ocean.
historical accident that thing exists in that setup. So
Yeah,
stay tuned. Thank you, Lou. Appreciate it.
thank you.
Thank you, Lou.
All right. Did you have something you want to say, sir?
Yeah.
You're welcome to do it now. We're in work session. It's all taped and whatever. So
Oh, I won't be
Come on up.
Come prepared and
All right.
keep it simple, so I will. My name's Artie Parmentier, 20 Rosella Avenue.
Yes.
And, just want to comment, couple of different issues. First of all, it's kind of weird, last time I was here, the leak blower dam is the big, one of the big issues. And
Yes.
I just want to comment on it. Now that we're about 3 months into it, I think I'm in favor of the ban. I think it's been, I think it's improved the quality of life, it has gotten a little quieter. My concern when it was first proposed, one of the advocates of leaf blowing said, well, in Mount Pleasant they have this, not Mount Pleasant,
Chappaqua.
Chappaqua.
Yes.
There you go. And nobody listens to it anyway. So, but that said, I was concerned about the enforcement. I do call our building department when somebody's using gas leak blower. I've also spoken with vendors and things like that. And, it's a rule. And I think it makes for a better quality of life. And I think that's part of the thing about being in the village. You know, we all, you know, yes, you have your rights, of course, but I think you also have responsibilities. And I also recall somebody saying, well, you're private property and you can do whatever you want on your property. Sort of, kind of, but not, yeah. So,
Well,
Not so much.
Yes, I mean, when it starts to affect your neighbors, everybody else, so, I mean, you know this, you were sidecar the whole thing, we heard lots of opinions on both sides of the issue, but, you know, I have a neighbor who said to me, why have you been talking about this? This is crazy, and I said, well, the reason we're talking about it is it's a significant concern to lots of people. It may not be to you, but we're the government of everybody, and so we sought to try to find a solution that didn't eliminate their use in the busy season, spring cleanup and leaf pickup, but which created a little more a quiet time in the rest of the year. And so I've certainly seen, as you have already seen, some violation of it, and we're talking to folks when it happens. And certainly if our experience of our neighbors is akin to what will happen here, people, I hope, will fall increasingly in line. We certainly got some folks out there who are just violating it.
No, that happens. But that said, I've also seen some of the landscapers who actually have gone out and gotten electric blowers.
Which is great.
Damn,
Yes.
I'm gonna go into the business.
Okay.
All right. So I just wanted to
Thank
comment
you.
on that.
Yes.
Maybe there's, like I said, my concern was the enforcement so far, so good. We can always be better, but right now it's way better than it's been in the past. The leaves will fall and they'll be back, and who knows, someday, it was compelling conversation before about, energy usage and stuff. I'm curious as to what some of the sources you had for it. But that being said, one thing that's improved as time goes on is efficiency. I mean, when I learned to drive, it was on a Ford LTD station where I got up 12 miles to the gallon. And I got my Toyota Corolla and get my 40 miles on the gallon. So, I'm an optimist, and I think as time goes on, there will be a way. And especially if people can make money on it, and they can. But my other things has to do with development. I'm not, I see you and I say I have nothing to complain about because you're off duty, but I'm here.
So now you're gonna unload.
Yeah, here we go.
Saving it up.
Time to open fire. Well, anyway, I just want to mention the building. I think that is kind of a mystic toy, and the big Bill Allen Memorial Plaza, because it's kind of big, and it's like all of a sudden you get like the giant kid, and have all the old Sears houses that are along Pleasant Road, and these, but you have, you know what, and there it is, and there it'll be for a while, a good while. My suggestion, so I live on Roselle, so I walked here, save energy, very efficient. And I'm looking at the roof, And I'm like, I'm looking at the air conditioners and things like that, and that doesn't help the look of the building. And it's an eyesore to my.
They're not done with it.
Are they gonna do
Well, so
something?
there's an ongoing conversation about that with the Architectural Review Board. A few things have happened, including the fact that they ended up higher than was originally envisioned, but in the other interesting piece, is the way buildings like that are heated and air conditioned is now completely different than it was a generation ago, where every apartment has its own unit. But if you look, I was in Brooklyn a couple of months ago and look up at this 20 some odd story building, and the entire parapet is ringed with split units. Just a category of utility we didn't have before. So Planning Commission is working on it. The owner is working on it.
I bought some last night. Oh, I don't know last night. You know, play. Could I make it shine?
Think you're smart enough on your watch.
Could I make it shine?
Something you said, like, it sparked a song.
Something I said sparked a song. See, in the end, it's technology is in charge of all of us, right? So, at any rate, the owner has been looking at painting them a different black, I think, to create a different look. And look, they're there, that they're going to be on top of every building that gets built. They're working on it. The last discussion has not been had, so
Right.
you're not the only one to express the comment.
Yeah, no, I, from what I understand, this is stuff.
Yes.
Lastly, and I mentioned this last time I was here when I did this. I'm a fan of, I've read a little bit about green roofs and green buildings in terms of plants into the, they have, in some places like in Singapore, not that we're there, but they have vertical, growth plants and things like that. There's a lot of things out there that I think are kind of like, I'm intrigued by that.
Yes.
So, maybe moving on as we get buildings as such, because we are gonna have to put people in places as they move to our lovely village, is maybe having just getting more trees and making green space. I'm curious, I know in the future, there's gonna have to be something done about what used to be the plumbing place there. And you have that property. And, if I could ask for one thing, I enjoy walking and seeing green space. I go to Rockefeller as often as possible. I think that's one of the best things about apartment buildings, where I have to get them away from that. But, I know, I've heard what you were saying about revenues, and, I know bills have to be paid, I can my hear. But, if there's any way perhaps to get, and I jump around a lot. If there's any way to get some more greenery in this town, that would be fantastic.
All right, so let me,
Especially in terms of the new development. I
so
mean,
two things to say about that. The first is, I encourage you on your way home to take a look at the walkway, not yet open, but standing on Memorial Plaza to the right of the new building, the landscape walkway that goes between Memorial Plaza and Cooley Street. I don't know if you've seen it. It is in my opinion, really quite remarkably landscaped. And it's a public right of way. It's
Now,
on private property.
is this between the post office?
Yes.
and- Okay.
So all these
I haven't
years
been
we.
down that yet. I
Oh,
don't know.
oh, well, it's not open yet, but you can see down it, there's a construction fence up. Huge improvement. All these years we've squeezed our way past post office trucks and back past the old tow garage, and there is now a beautiful landscaped walkway that with a permanent public right of way when it opens. And so let me just say, in the category of trees, I think as of right now, August 14th, there are more plants and trees in that block of Memorial Plaza than there have been in any of our lifetimes.
Good.
So that's a good thing. Let me say the other thing is, as you probably know, we have a proposed civic space at the Manville Road end of Memorial Plaza that would essentially take that section of parking lot from about the train station overpass out to Manville Road and turn it into a public space with trees and seating and a paved area, multi-purpose opportunities, places to sit, places to gather, places for small events. Not everyone is in full agreement with it. I happen to think it's an important thing for us to do. But what I can tell you is we're going to do the first piece of that, and almost entirely funded by state grants, 500 and some thousand that we have in state grants, to build the first piece of that associated with the closing of that slip lane out of the commuter area. So that is going to create a whole bunch of new trees right there in the middle of Pleasantville. So
I'm very pleased to hear that.
All right.
I spend, on hot days, I spend my days chasing shade.
all right. Well, there's going to be a nice shaded way to get from Cooley to Memorial Plaza very soon. It's already there. It just hasn't finally opened.
Okay,
And not too far down the road, you'll have trees to dart between there and the train station.
oh, no, it's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I know. It's,
And well, no,
No, it's
like
great.
you say, I remember what it was like, I
That big
think
rock?
that song Desolation Road.
The rock abandoned?
Yeah, the big rock.
yes,
So, no.
I have the before and after pictures someday. I'll do a slideshow.
All right, well, listen.
All right, thank you, Artie.
Thank you all for
Thank
everything.
you
very much
for your
appreciate it.
time. You have a nice night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any comments from the people online?
I see no comments from anyone.
Does anybody online have a comment or question?
I mean, in the end, we got into a public comment just because those folks had gotten here early rather than our usual time period. So, all right, back to what we were intending to do at 7. Discussion regarding the loading zones on Memorial Plaza and on Cooley Street associated with the new building. Did you guys get a chance to look at the attachment? I can share my screen. Screen. There we go. I have achieved it. All right, so what you see here is the Memorial Plaza side. Here's the gazebo. And what is proposed here is to take the first parking space to the right, to the left, I'm sorry, in this view, of the crosswalk and this crosshatched area, which is the dead space remaining from the last angled space, and turn that into a loading, unloading zone. The idea there being to provide a space for tenants who are loading and unloading, for delivery people who are coming or going from the future commercial space, etc. And then a similar proposed loading zone. Now we're on the Cooley Street side. This is the new building here. This is the entrance to its parking garage. This is the lane lot. And this is Cooley Street, soon to be a through street. This is the new crosswalk that will be created that takes you from the landscape walkway alongside the new building and down across the street to this sidewalk, which gets you either back to Bedford Road or down to Key Food. Proposal is to identify that space also as a loading zone. All of this requires us to sharpen up our definition of a loading zone. We've got a few of those already, including one, for example, in the lot between Holy Innocents and the bagel store. And the definition of what they are and who they're for and how long you can park there just needs to be sharpened up a little bit. Anybody have a view of any of this?
So who proposed this in general, the building?
So the building owner came forward with this proposal, and it has been vetted by folks on our side. And now the question is whether we think this is in the end a benefit from the standpoint of serving the needs created by that building, but also avoiding a circumstance where deliveries and servicing of commercial space and the like is blocking traffic otherwise.
I sort of think we should be doing this more broadly
Right.
in the village, because the delivery trucks in particular create a lot of backups.
Yeah, so I can tell you, I have a ringside seat on Wheeler in my day job, and there is a loading space right at the corner of the lot behind Holy Innocents, just past Soul Brewing. And that gets some use, but it is not getting used by folks who are delivering to Wheeler Avenue. So, and of course, we're seeing it all over the village with now used to have UPS and FedEx. Now we have UPS, FedEx, and Amazon trucks, and a lot of increased activity on that front. I will say, and it's a discussion we need to have. The intention of the 5-minute parking on the parallel parking side of Wheeler was many moons ago intended to provide in and out parking for folks doing a very quick errand, but also parking for delivery vehicles. That is not functioning very well that way, and it is, I think, in part an enforcement issue, which we have limited capacity at times, but also the reality that 5 minutes is probably not enough time for almost anybody. So
Yeah, well, I do think we ought to think on Wheeler about taking some stretch of that and making it specifically a delivery thing. Just, you know, a UPS guy or a FedEx guy decides they don't have a spot to pull into, and then you've got a big mess.
although I have to say, I don't doubt that it happens. I don't see too many big messes. The big messes are more likely to be a bigger box truck, something like that. And those guys are typically arriving earlier. So longer conversation.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah, I support this.
Paul,
Great, support as well.
okay. Block party planning discussion. Take it away, trustee Alvarez.
All right, so, just an update on what's going on. The event is approaching in about a little over a month. We're looking at the specific dates. Here, it's Saturday, September 23rd, with the rain date of Saturday, September 30th. The plan again is to have it be at Washington Avenue, where it'll be from 1 o'clock to 6 o'clock, 5-hour span, and having it on Wheeler Avenue from 3 o'clock to 8 o'clock.
So Washington starts,
Correct.
and there'll be the car show idea.
Correct. Car show will be there. There'll be a few vendors there as well. To start off, but mainly the car show will be
So
over there.
give me those dates again. It's September 30 is the main, I'm sorry, September 23 is the main date.
Correct.
The rain
September
date
30th.
is the following week?
Yes,
the third.
September 30th.
Okay.
So we also made sure to coordinate. We know that homecoming is not that weekend, so it's not really going to affect either weekend because homecoming is, I believe, in October. And so we clear that away. Since we anticipate on closing both roads, when we did this last year, it was a Sunday, so it was different. The weather was also a little bit windy and it looked like it could rain. Obviously, now we're looking at, with the rain date, that we'll be able to call the event beforehand, depending on how bad the weather is looking for the whole weekend overall. So
By which you mean you might decide that Friday?
probably I would say by Friday.
Okay,
So that we can plan accordingly. Obviously, we get 2 bad weekends of bad weather, we'd be in a tough position, but this at least sets us up because it was last year we realized with having just a rain date on the following day, a lot of times the weather just comes together like that on the whole weekend. So that's at least this week gives a better chance. So in regard to the event itself, it's Chamber of Commerce is putting together the whole event, and we're working with a lot of different businesses. We're working with other, we're trying to get in touch with the fire department, who also, I believe, has Fire Prevention Month that month. So we really want to incorporate a bunch of different groups. Our plan, that the only change really that we are looking to do for this event and compared to the last 2 is that this year we have asked for the open container law to be waived on Wheeler Avenue. Many other places such as Mount Pleasant, who's doing the same kind of event as ours, I believe in October, they have a longer section of a road where essentially they've waived the open container law. The reason why we also did this was because last year we had a beer garden that was essentially behind the parking lot on Wheeler and the Holy Innocents Church. So when we did this event and just had that area, it kind of secluded everyone into this one area. And it kind of went against what we were trying to promote, is having everyone be together. So for that reason, we wanted to have everyone on Wheeler that's the different vendors, and just have it be from Bedford Road to Manville, where it's just that one section. It's going to have the majority of the vendors there, and it's going to feel like other festivals that we've seen, or other fairs that we've seen in other places like Tarrytown, Sleepy Hollow, Ossining, that we've seen where they close off one road and they just have people be able to just go up and down the street, and it just kind of, it doesn't just put someone off in a corner where people have to decide if they did want to go get some food or go grab a beer or something, and now they have to, separate with their kids or the activities that they're doing. So this kind of makes it one more.
So just to be clear, I think, at least in the case of Tarrytown, although that happens, that isn't their official rule. I think the intention of their rule is that you can drink outside the place you got it, but you can't walk up another street. I'm sure they do. Yeah.
Yes, but with some of them, I think, well, there's two. I mean, there's one that I think one event sometimes kind of gets out of control in that way if you don't have it. But here, by us waiving this, it's just keeping people in that one area in total, all of Wheeler Avenue, and having us control that. And the way that we're going to control that is that we are going to have special wristbands that are going to be given out to all of the vendors that are on Wheeler Avenue already. Now, the open container law only allows you to serve beer, wine, or cider. So it's not anything involving alcohol. And so obviously people can have well drinks, margaritas, things like that to walk around them. The way that it would work is we would give out the wristbands to all the different vendors. So for example, Sol is one of the main vendors there. So when an adult comes to buy a beverage, they have to get a wristband. From there, they'll get ID'd by somebody that works there. And then with that band, you already have been ID'd and it's been verified that you're an adult and you're allowed to have an alcoholic beverage. If you were then to go down, let's say, to Pub Street, because you already have your wristband, you would just, buy a drink.
The band is identifiable by the vendor who issues it, right?
The band is going to be identifiable by essentially all of the participating vendors that are part of the team.
So I thought when we were talking about it with the insurance guy, you said it would be, each one would be different, but they'd all be within the program. Meaning like the name would be printed on, so you knew who had ID'd somebody in case there was an issue, where the ID was pulled.
Okay, well, we can look. I mean, we're also looking at that part in that we are all going to be working together on it. So we can definitely work on that.
It would still let somebody get a drink from somewhere
Right,
else.
from somewhere
Just
else.
if there was somebody who turned out to be underage or whatever, you'd know who ID'd them.
Right. Well, I guess the idea that we have looking at it more is if you're seeing anyone with an open container on Wheeler Avenue, they will have a wristband in general. So, anyone that, and I think that what allows us then to do is anyone that looks younger than for some reason they shouldn't have a wristband. It just allows you to, I think, look into that and say, hey, how did this person get a wristband? And it's a special wristband that we're not giving out to anyone in advance. It's just going to be to the specific vendors out there.
Yep.
So, and we've had some because we bought them last year for what we were going to do. So that was part of our budget as well, that we didn't have to purchase those again. And talking with some of the vendors already that are on Wheeler, they like the idea that, they can have that control to check IDs, and that they're not essentially, people can go to different places depending where they are.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it's going to be just being able to not just have everyone focused in one area. People can be having, something to eat at one place and can essentially grab a wristband and go somewhere else and just stay in that area itself, which would be on Wheeler Avenue. The rest of the event, we plan on having the same as we've had it the other years, where we have essentially the kids area that's at the end of, pretty much, I guess, in front of here, Village Hall, and this is where we had all the kids section. All the vendors will be on both sides, as they have always been, just with different, tables and chairs that they put out. We're trying to add more tables so that people can sit around, and just hang out and either, get food or just be with their families, things like that. So in that aspect, that's how we are going. Really, the only big difference now is us eliminating the beer garden area, which was that parking lot, and being on Wheeler Avenue itself.
So will that parking lot have any use at all?
I think it would just be parking.
But we
And
can't use it as parking unless we allow people to come out the inn.
It's a good point. It's so.
then it would just,
Which is a county issue, I think. Chief?
As far as coming out on a Bedford Road, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, if we allowed parking in that lot, the one between Holy Innocents and the bagel store, you can't come out onto Wheeler. You'd have to come out what's normally a one-way entrance.
Correct.
I do know that at various points in history, we've talked to the county about whether we could even imagine turning the one-way route the other way. So you would enter on Wheeler and come out on Bedford Road, and the county would not permit, I'm not sure it was a good idea anyway, but county wouldn't permit that because it was too close to the traffic light. What would you say about an event like this?
Which part, as far as?
I mean, if either that parking lot has no use, we simply close it. Or if people are allowed to park there, we'd have to have them going out what's normally a one-way in.
I mean, I don't recall any conversations with the county as far as what their concerns were.
I mean, that was years ago. That was about a permanent change.
Right.
Right.
I mean, I think we have done it on a short-term basis when we've had to close the exit previously.
Yeah, right. Something is, work is going on or something.
I mean, I'd have to look into it and kind of get an idea of sort of what the
I
concern.
mean, it would be a shame to lose all that parking.
Oh, absolutely.
So just preliminarily, you think it might be workable?
It's
Okay.
not on its surface, on its face, it's not
Okay.
possible.
All right. Okay, so I mean, as you know, I enjoy a beer as much as the next guy. I have some misgivings about the very public expansion of consumption of alcohol in the public realm, but I understand the argument, and I certainly want to have a successful event. And folks are saying, well, if everyone else does it, why doesn't Pleasantville? And I get all that.
and I think part of also what my plan is to utilize social media, and as well as the show that I have on PCTV, I do the more, where I do a video explaining to everyone what's happening, what's going on, so that everyone's aware of what to expect. This isn't, we talked about it, David saying, he loved the idea of the Oktoberfest. Part of why I changed that was because I think there is a notion with Oktoberfest, people do think, or even younger people think, that there's going to be a big, more of a drinking celebration kind of thing. And so that was,
in Pleasant.
so that was one of the things that to me, a block party and promoting, the events for kids, and, we're gonna have face painters and we're gonna have balloon makers. All of this really makes it a family thing, but at the same time,
I agree.
you can enjoy, a drink responsibly kind of thing. And I do believe that, I know this hasn't really been done here ever, or we do something like this on a road like this. Where we're actually doing this from the beginning and we know what we're getting into. But I do believe in our residents, and I do believe that in our community that we can behave responsibly in general. And I think have a good, safe event that hopefully this can pioneer for other events, especially in the future with, a civic space and things like that we can all be responsible and obviously just have a good time. Have a good time that, everyone's being safe and no one's getting rowdy or anything like that. So, there was a concern on my end to kind of like, I'm not trying to get, Pleasantville to become an alcoholic kind of village or anything like that.
I didn't mean to
Yeah,
suggest.
but I understand as an attorney, it's like I'm being crazy for, putting things out there, but as a resident, as a neighbor, and as speaking to other people, that they're like, the first time we did this, it didn't happen. It was kind of generic, that it kind of flowed a little bit because we didn't know what we were really doing the first time we planned this, where people were kind of walking up and down, and and luckily it was a good event. But now, like I said, now that I know it can happen, I'd rather control it. I'd rather think everything in ahead to see what we can do so that we're prepared and just try to have the best event that we can have.
And is it your expectation that the village costs will be similar to last year?
I think so.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, we're not trying to do,
are we having more rentals, more?
I don't think so.
Okay,
I'm not
good.
trying to. I've also partly as to why, I can tell you that last year at this point, we had promoted it a lot more. But I do think that the changing it into having it on just one road will be a big changer to just be just a more, centered event.
Yeah,
Everyone's
I
just
agree.
wondering
Yeah, I agree.
everywhere.
That,
So,
and the other thing, I mean, I recall a conversation about what could we do about lighting in the back parking lot that it
right.
avoids that problem entirely.
Exactly. So I do think that it's a bit more concrete now, the plans that we have. It hasn't been promoted as much, but I almost kind of want to keep it more of a local thing. So that's why we haven't really been putting it out there as much, but
I mean, the car show thing, those guys promoted among the
themselves,
car
correct.
crowd.
So I do
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
that, putting people
Yeah.
in.
Well,
So
and that was a fun thing. I mean,
Yeah.
some pretty amusing vehicles.
yeah, hopefully now with good weather, because we had other cars that were supposed to come that were vintage
Yeah.
cars that didn't because of the concern of the weather.
I was offended that no one wanted me to bring my 2007 Honda Element, but
So
I have to live.
maybe we'll have to ask you this.
I gotta ride the horse on
Yeah.
that. All right,
So,
anything
that's
else
it.
on that?
No, that's it. So
All
I'll
right.
keep everyone updated.
Great.
I'm gonna reach out, Chief, to you, so we can start doing some monthly meetings again. I don't know, I'm gonna try to send out something maybe for this Friday, trying to get the head of the department, just so we're on the same page of what's going on. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for putting that all together. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
All right.
I enjoy it.
We have a few other items on our work session, but we'll come back to those after our regular meeting, it being 8:06. So we will depart our regular session and engage, our work session and engage in the regular session. So good evening. Welcome to the Village Board meeting for the Village of Pleasantville. Today is Monday, August 14. If you are watching live on Monday, August 14, you can pick up and follow along and participate if you wish via our Zoom link. You can always get the Zoom links for this meeting as well as that of other boards and commissions at our website at pleasantville-ny.gov. And all of the goings on are recorded via Zoom, and those tapes are made available for on-demand webcast at PCTV76.org, where you can pick up recent and past meetings as well. So I have a few announcements to make, and I just want to make one first, and then we'll invite the chief who is here for his quarterly presentation about the goings on in the police force. But I just wanted to mention a couple of weeks ago, a really quite remarkable event at the Burns Film Center, sponsored by the Burns, along with the Pleasantville Volunteer Fire Department and the Pleasantville Ambulance Corps. A screening of a movie called Odd Hours, No Pay, Cool Hat. David came with me, brought along your son. I don't know whether he left enthusiastic about becoming a fireman or not, but
He's 8, so he's got a couple of years.
a pretty really quite remarkable movie about the volunteer fire service and volunteer EMS with some footage from various places around the country, including right across the river in Muncie, but also places in Nebraska and California wildfires, all focusing on the volunteer fire service. So I would very much encourage folks to take a look. If you're interested, there's a trailer as well as more info about the movie at oddhoursfilm.com. But one interesting piece about this is that the folks that made this are making it available for screenings without charge to volunteer fire departments and communities all around the country. Quite a long list of them on the website, and I don't know whether in the eventual distribution it will be available as a streaming thing. I don't think it's on streaming yet, but I just wanted to thank the folks who put that together. Thank the Burns and right here at home, thank the members of the Pleasantville Volunteer Fire Department and the Pleasantville Ambulance Corps.
Maybe the volunteer fire department should screen that during the block party day, when the block is closed off anyway.
In the firehouse or something?
Yeah, firehouse. That would be a good idea.
Right now, I'll talk to Dan.
Yeah. All right, but anyway, take a look at oddhoursfilm.com and be reminded of the the really quite remarkable service provided by volunteers around this country and very close to home right here at Pleasantville, New York, 1057. So thanks to the Burns, thanks to the fire department and the ambulance corps. All right. Chief Eric Grutzner is here for his quarterly update. You recently had a training, a multi group training thing. I imagine you'll touch on that, and so I won't.
That's actually, that's the next quarter.
Oh, right. It falls in the next quarter.
It does, exactly.
All right,
There's
so-
always a bit of a
So why
delay.
don't you just provide a 30-second update
Sure.
on what you did? And then you'll tell me when you want me to share the screen.
Yep, briefly, for some time, the need and the recognition of the need for fire, ambulance, and police to train together, speak the same language, share the same space in regards to an active shooter response has been apparent. And with with a lot of people driving the bus, most notably Chief Serios Medino from the fire department, Captain Caitlin Zapata from the ambulance corps, our own Lieutenant Jesse Woolman. We conducted a training exercise where we brought all three agencies together and simulated some actual emergency situations that we would all need to work together on. So I'll definitely go into more details about it, but I think we had probably close to about 60 or 70 members of the three services out together last Monday at the high school. Very thankful that the high school was offered to us and that the administration of the school district recognized the necessity and the importance of the training. So definitely touch more on it at our next get together. But it was a very impressive showing from especially the ambulance corps and the fire department to bring this together. And I think everybody walked away from it knowing that it was valuable training. So went very well.
Thank you for that. Look forward to a detailed report, but thanks to all the folks who participated and to the school district. So that's it.
So whenever you're ready.
Share screen. Yes, I. All right.
So we begin as we normally do. Next one. Just a list of our calls for service. No major changes there. So just a quick touch on, I'm going to go through all the different things that we've been doing over the last 3 months, but as promised, we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into the overtime numbers from the last fiscal year, as well as an update on our process for New York State accreditation. So I do not mean to rush through any of the other things that are going on, but we are. I would like to also make sure we make time for that as well. So if nothing really stands out, I'll just kind of move along kind of quickly. Nothing here really stood out, just sort of for purposes you see across and what a lot of what our patrol officers are doing. Numbers remaining relatively steady as far as activity levels, blotters, arrests, tickets, things like that. Next. Our community policing initiatives, we had Sergeant Burwa, who's always wonderful. We have the motorcycle unit that he can take out. If the weather's bad, sometimes he just brings a car, but kids always get excited whenever they get to see the motorcycle. So we were up at one of the preschools here in town with Pleasant Hill. And then of course, members of the department were all three of the graduations, both the road and also in high school. Next. And we continue to expand the programs that we use to reach out to our students in the school. So the end of the year, Detective Charletti, who's really become our point person for being in front of the classrooms and being in front of the kids in the middle school and the high school. Was there talking about all manner of issues. Obviously, he goes in with a topic that he wants to discuss, whether it's a safety issue or smoking or vaping or drug or alcohol use. But he obviously lets the conversation go where the kids want to take it. And so we really found that to be beneficial. You see Detective Charletti now out in town. Usually there's somebody walking past who's school age who's saying hello. So he's very approachable. He's definitely the right person for the job.
And worth noting to those who may not know, he's returning to the schools he came from.
That is correct. So very familiar with the schools and the staff there. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but when we talk about what our activity level has been for the last 3 months, I would be remiss if I did not mention our increased activity level in regards to students from the Cottage. I know there's been a lot of things that have been said about that. I bring it up merely just to say, that I commend our officers, for their handling of this. A lot of these situations vary greatly in their scope and in their seriousness. You know, we have for many years, had the cottage school as our neighbors, obviously for as long as I've been here, they've been there for 100 years. And our officers have really done a phenomenal job recognizing the situation, recognizing what the needs of these students are, needs of the staff are, and you know, our activity level has definitely increased in the last few months in regards to this. And I just want to commend our officers for their diligence and their professionalism every chance they get the opportunity to work with the staff or the kids, you know, the kind of school. You know, invariably, I come away from reading those reports. Many of them have happened, and I'm reading about them after the fact. But I come away just really impressed with the thoughtfulness and the compassion that our officers show on a regular basis. And as
Has
well,
there been any improvement in the recent weeks since it became such a public matter? Or do you
So-
see any change at all?
so there was a time, especially in May, where we sort of, there was quite a spate of incidents, serious incidents, robberies, larcenies, convenience stores, attempts to break into different businesses, some closed, some open. You know, DoorDash orders are left on a counter and people go in and grab them. So definitely it hasn't stopped. The issues haven't stopped. It's difficult because, again, without going too deep into the machinations of it, but it really is a small group of kids who they have there who sort of are the driving force. We're running into the same kids on the serious cases. We're running into the same students over and over and over again. And so it doesn't take much to tip the balance as far as the serious incidents, especially. We're still dealing with them at a high rate. It's not as if once that you know, the situation became more public that we noticed a precipitous drop. But we definitely haven't had as many, shouldn't even say that. It's very hard to tell sort of the trends at this point.
Right. Well, so as folks likely know, a few weeks back, the town of Mount Pleasant convened a press conference and issued the demand that the school be closed, that the cottage school be closed. I was pleased that State Senator Andrew Stewart Cousins, who now represents this area and is the Senate Majority Leader, issued a statement and a letter to the relevant state agencies demanding that kids who were outside the scope of the JCCA's capacity to deal with them, which I think is the case for some of these kids, even in the view of the JCCA administration, be relocated immediately. So I have been in touch with her, expressing our concern about resolution of this, and so stay tuned.
Because even the administration there said they were sort of overwhelmed, right?
Yeah, I think it's clear. I mean, look, among the problems that exist in society at large is great needs with insufficient resources.
Very much so. So we go into our overtime numbers. Again, I put this out just as a comparative piece. If you notice, however, in the last
You're
quarter.
cherry picking, you're trying to find a high quarter.
But no, so our numbers are down. Our numbers are down, and we'll go into obviously not only for this quarter, but then in the totality conversation, sort of why some of those things happen and what are the factors that affect those numbers. So again, I'll show it to you a different way. But again, we're starting to see a trend. If you notice, you know, on this chart, this is now going back all the way. This is not just the last 5 quarters. This is back to 2021 when we began doing these, some of these, we began collecting the data for public consumption, and it's up and down. I think that's the
But I
key
mean,
takeaway.
literally doubled over the course of 2 years.
Yeah. And we would take steps forward, and then we would take steps back, and we would take steps forward, and we would take steps back. But each quarter, each, and as we'll say, also you'll see in the presentation, each month really becomes its own, has its own story to tell. So moving forward. again, some of this is indicative. You see the red on the far left there, that red, the high peak there, that's the October, November, December of 2022. And then you'll see if you move over more to the right there, that one anomaly, that is our reimbursable overtime. I'll go more into specifics of that, but that was a short-term situation that, although I won't say it's budget neutral, it is not as impactful as definitely some of the other.
Because we get compensated for it.
Perfect. Okay. So our personnel issues, Sergeant Zane, who came out of the detective division to be made a patrol sergeant, served in that capacity for about a year. Went back in following the retirement of Detective Sergeant Juan Garcia. There was a gap when we talk about personnel, especially when we talk about the year. There's usually a gap. We unfortunately don't have the resources to fill holes immediately when we have a loss. So for a short time there, we did not have a detective sergeant. So obviously the detectives in the room were carrying more of the load. We tasked Jesse Woman, who's our detective lieutenant, with being more involved in the day-to-day operations. But we did come to a point where we could move Sergeant Zane in there. And especially now with the first accreditation, as we finish the project that we started some time ago with the evidence room, he's in charge of all of our evidence, all of our sealing records. That role needed to be filled, and so we were able to do that this quarter. Next, please. So this slide might look familiar because it is pretty much a cut and paste from our last one where we were confident we were close to a community service worker position. We're continuing to work with HR on this process, but as Alyssa can tell you, we think this time we really think we're close. We're expecting that possibly at the next meeting or definitely the meeting thereafter, we should have somebody in front of the board, have a name for the board so that we can move forward. It is appropriate to have two people, especially with giving schools an extra person to cover a crossing guard post when necessary. And so really, as things as life sort of returns to the school year and the school calendar, we're excited and anticipating we'll have our second community service worker.
Who might be on board before school starts?
That's
I'm hoping to have an answer by like Wednesday.
Remind me what
What's been our biggest challenge?
Parking enforcement and
Has it been the
parking
hiring
enforcement
part?
and the crossing guard.
what they're guessing?
it's the
Currently, we
that
used
is
to have two.
it is a
now
civil
we have
service
Sarah.
position, and we have to continually meet the civil service requirements. Have been a challenge.
All right, and that's a budgeted position that's been vacant.
Good news, we are very close to hiring another full-time crossing guard, so that would mean we will start the year with a full complement of guards and potentially at least one, if not two fill-ins. So I hope it's great news.
That's good.
Yes, absolutely. Some of the training that we participated in the department, Sergeant Leone, who we recall not too long ago, was here to be promoted. Went to the required supervisor school, the New York State criminal justice class that's offered by New York State after the police academy. It's a 3-week school. Talks all manner of leadership, responsibilities. A large section on it is crisis management and actively involved incident command structure, things like that, all types of things that we're trying to push forward to our officers as well. Sergeant Burwa, as again, talking about accreditation, participated in the assessor program. So you don't need to be an assessor to be an accreditation manager. However, we thought it was valuable for him to sort of see the other side, what the assessors would be looking at. So we sent him to that school. Next. In May, we did our one of our 2 firearms recertifications. So the active threat integrated response, again, this all goes to that training that we did with the schools, which is bringing sort of agencies together in response to a threat, whether it's law enforcement agencies from other jurisdictions or agencies from our own municipality or from different disciplines. You know, obviously we all recognize that there's going to be a lot of cooperation that's necessary. And if we don't prepare for that ahead of time, situation can be handled not nearly as well as we would like to. So as I've said before, Lieutenant Woolman has really taken the leadership role throughout the county as far as mutual aid, coordinating. He's the zone A coordinator, so he's in charge of mutual aid coordination for all the agencies, for all large scale incidents that occur in the northern part of the county. And he, as we talked about before, especially with the swatting incident that happened on March 30th, him being there, his experience was valuable to that situation being handled. There was an active shooter training scenario in Yorktown in May that he and Officer Alonso attended. Officer Alonso was a participant and Lieutenant Wallman as an observer. Next.
I have a quick question about the swatting incident. I know there was a concern about communication from like students who wanted to text. I mean, did we ever see learning from that event if there's anything that can be done to I know that there was like issues with, I guess, people communicating with their kids, like maybe too many messages going on, or was it that ever addressed in case something like this ever happened?
Yeah, so I wasn't specifically sure. I can definitely touch base with the school district as far as what they would have been concerned about. I mean, there was nothing that we were doing on our end that would have potentially stopped that normal typical cell phone communication back and forth between parents and students. Excuse me, obviously, as the kids are locked down, there's the restriction on the use of the phones, but the lockdown portion of that particular incident, so there's stages to it, but the actual lockdown possible active threat involved sort of situation was relatively short. So, it might have been just a volume situation. It might have been, too many people trying to use the same Wi-Fi. I know there was communications issues on the part of the superintendent because she was trying to communicate out through the K-12 alerts. It was a different, and she said this publicly, so I'm not telling you details out of school, but basically the application was different on the phone than it was at the desktop. Usually she sends these from their desktop, lesson learned type of thing where she realized, okay, now I need to do steps A, B, and C instead of just steps A and B. But as far as direct communication between parents and their children, you can look into that and make sure. At this point now, it hasn't reached us as far as there needs to be some sort of change or anything.
I mean, that was part of what gave rise to the we need more self-service conversation. I can report I was standing on that high school circle and talked many times on my AT&T cell phone without difficulty, but I do know some parents in the area said they couldn't reach their kids, whatever. Some of it, I imagine, has to do with the fact that depending on where you are in the school, the cell service may degrade to next to nothing based on the school situation. And of course, in the horrifying hypothetical that there is an active threat, the flow of videos and all of that is both potentially a great advantage and a potentially great disadvantage all at once.
And again, I've said it before and I'll say it again, I just want to thank the community for their response to that. It was a very measured, responsible reaction. When we talk about these things, when we plan for these type of events, we assume the worst, that every parent is going to immediately drop everything, get in their car and drive as close to the school as possible, and then park their car in the middle of the road to block any access for any emergency vehicle to get through to make sure they can get to the front of the school. And we didn't see that. Part of it was the planning and the way we staged our response, but also parents really were very responsible. We're going to continue, and I know the school is going to continue to message that need for cooperation, that you can't necessarily help us if you are there, and you might be hindering our response. So please just wait, and we'll get the information to you as quickly as possible. So community really stepped up in that as well. Other trainings that we did, the 911 diversion training. What this is obviously as part and parcel to police reform and the need for the recognition of officers doing less when it comes to mental health crises and emergencies. Is the idea that when the call comes in, and the county has spent a lot of resources to make sure that when an agency receives a call, that the officers are not necessary to go on and are not appropriate to go on, that there's a way for us to divert that call from a police response to a mental health response. And so the county is offering training for that. We're sending our officers along in that. I believe all of our sergeants, who are most likely going to be the officers who answer the phone, have been through that, and we're going to just continue to push that down through all of our officers. In addition to that, also as part and parcel for that was our cooperation with our mobile crisis response team. If you're reading the public blotters, you'll see many calls where we were contacting the mobile crisis response team They're here unsolicited once a week just to touch base and build relationships and check in on things. We've had them respond to scenes. We've had them follow up with people in the past, everything from people in crisis or distress to people who are unhoused. You know, the more that we work with them, the more that we deal with them, the more avenues we find to get them involved in.
And a big shout out to George Latimer and the county board, and all of the department heads for having established what they call it, Project Alliance. Really more always to be done, but enormous progress.
I mean, inevitably, our officers are going to be asked to be involved in situations regarding those who are either in crisis or struggling with whether it's mental health, whether it's intellectual or developmental disabilities. We pride ourselves on our attack and our skill in dealing with those situations, but the more resources that we have and the more partners that we can bring to bear on those, I suppose, the happier we are. Detective Charletti participated in a targeted training in regards to sexual assault investigations as well. And in June, we had the opportunity to send a few officers to Drive to Survive class. You know, as we think of all the dangers and the risks to the well-being, physical well-being of officers. You know, sometimes what's overlooked is vehicles, operating vehicles. We operate them all the time. We do so at high rates of speed and in difficult circumstances. And so our insurance carrier was providing this training, so we were able to send a few officers for that. Again, another active shooter rescue task force drill, this time attended by Lieutenant Woman Detective Sergeant Zane. That was in White Plains in June. And the I'm Human training, again, you know, one of our goals for this year is officer wellness and officer well-being. So we sent 2 of our officers. This I'm Human training was advanced resources for community policing and officer well-being. So it sort of dovetails the idea that the more involved that the officers are with the community, the better it is for their own mental health and mental well-being. So really giving skills and showing different strategies to incorporate not only officer well-being, but also community policing. All right, so this begins our discussion of last year's overtime. So one of the, obviously the need for this group, and in fact, the numbers for last year's overtime were so large, we recognize that. As we go into the numbers a little bit, we talk a little bit about the situations. First thing to keep in mind definitely is the overtime. It's a number of factors that create the overtime. There is no simple one. There are a few things that obviously we could necessarily do, or a few decisions that we could make. But in general, a number of things drive the overtime numbers. First and foremost, the department needs, we need to shift 3 shifts a day with 3 officers. So that's 9 shifts every day that we have to have fill our staffing and assignments, where we put the resources that we have and what we ask them to do, different opportunities that are provided to us. And lastly, things like grants and other reimbursables where we can potentially provide services or increase community safety at no direct cost to our budgets. But obviously the cost of the overtime budget, I understand enough about the budgeting process to realize, of course, there is a budget, but then when it is reimbursed, that's good. So a little bit into the details. So our payroll budget last year listed there about $2.3 million. And our total expenditures were about 2.2. So there was a little bit of savings there. Our overtime budget.
So just to be clear for the public, that's salary, that's not benefits.
That is correct. That is
Okay.
Full-time
Understood.
officer salaries. Our overtime budget was originally listed at $375,000. Eventually, we ended up spending almost $636,000 on overtime. Obviously, that's a difference of $261,000 and represents approximately 27% of payroll, our payroll numbers. So
the net of the 2 is 150-ish over budget.
yes,
And does this take into account any part of that overtime that was reimbursable?
not yet. Would it go?
Was there any significant reimbursable overtime in the in the last fiscal year?
Oh, yes.
So, and would that number, when you have it significantly reduce the net?
I will leave it to you to decide if it's significant. I thought it was.
That I think would suggest it's not gonna be.
No, I think it was. I mean, it was.
My interpretation of significant.
No, it's definitely that. Listen, I would love to say, take out all the things that we got reimbursed for and we're back to exactly where we started. We're not, but the reason that the number is 636,000 is in a significant portion to the fact that that we did do that reimbursable overtime. But we will definitely discuss that in more detail.
Okay,
A few more things with our expenditure at that number, we did a total of 6,911 hours. So our average overtime rate was $92 an hour. Just as we sit here, one of the challenges is always crossing over between hours and dollars. Some things we track in hours, some things we track in dollars. So just to give a basic.
so again, obviously this is a logical way to do it for the benefit of anyone who's watching. The real costs to the taxpayer is greater than that, because we have employee benefits, including our pension contribution and Social Security and Medicare that are based on how much you get paid. So the real number is higher than this.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, so we break our overtime down into different sections. Some of these sections are actually explained because they are not immediately self-apparent. First of all, our administrative leave coverage. So administrative leave is not overtime. It sometimes can be overtime. If there's, for whatever reason, someone needs to be removed from a shift, and we have to cover them, we call that administrative leave. The vast majority of these shifts, however, are when we have a training need. So if we're going to send somebody to that supervisor school, and that's a 3-week school where they're going to be working Monday through Friday. But if on their yearly schedule, they were supposed to work Tuesday through, or let's say Friday through Monday, well, we can't have them work Saturday and Sunday as they normally would, and then go to school Monday through Friday and come back for Saturday and Sunday. We have to give them days off. So in order to accommodate a training schedule, we'll administrative leave as necessary. So when you have somebody in a 3-week school, if they're supposed to work all 3 of those weekends, well, guess what? Now we have 6 days of administrative leave. Now, that doesn't mean that they're working 6 less days in the year. In fact, they might end up working more because they might go to a 5-day work week as opposed to a usual 4-day work week. But that's what that represents. Casework could be either a detective or an officer. So if somebody makes an arrest at 10 o'clock at night for a DWI and the processing of that arrest carries over into the next shift, they're going to get overtime for that. It also covers when a detective is doing an investigation. We did have a couple of cases this year that required officers to put in more time. And so that number is relatively typical, not unexpected from what we would see. Again, our detective overtime is a fraction of what our detectives have the opportunity for much smaller number of overtime than our patrol officers do. The main need is in COVID coverage is listed there. The reason is 0, not because we didn't have anybody who was COVID, but because in the system we didn't say that it was COVID. We just put them out, and
So that they'd show up in the sick number.
they would either sick or potentially an administrative leave. Court security is when we have officers here in the courtroom providing security. The discovery, it's a small number, but again, as part of part and parcel to police reform, the discovery process, we have to generate all of our reports, pull all of our video, do everything that we might use in the prosecution, and then some, even things we have no intention of using in the prosecution, and send that to the district attorney within a specified time frame, 10 days. And so on very few occasions that does occur over time. Field training, we have officers who are participating in field training, new officers. Governor's Traffic Safety Committee grants, hearings and trials, OTR coverage. OTR is overtime return. So if an officer makes overtime, he has a choice. He can take it as money. He can be paid out at his overtime rate, or he can take it as time. If he takes it as time, we might potentially have to pay somebody else to come in and cover that. Okay. So when I do the breakdown later, that's going to be in a reimbursable it'll be listed under reimbursable, because it's really just, I made the 8 hours at Pleasantville Day, I'm going to take the next Saturday off and another officer is going to come in. It's the same 8 hours. We're just passing it around. So inevitably, it is more reimbursable than it is out of pocket. There's always the original 8 hours that had to be generated. But once it's taken as OTR, it's not creating any new. Personal day coverage, we'll talk more about that. Prisoner transports back and forth to the jail. It's necessary to bring people back and forth. Those numbers used to be far higher. There used to be 2 detectives every single week doing prisoner transports, or every other week doing prisoner transports. Again, police reform, we have far fewer people being remanded to the county jail, and so we have far less need to transport them back and forth. The reimbursable number, so 458 hours. Again, there's a category called reimbursables that includes more things, but just straight utility companies doing work, needs security, needs traffic control on the road. That's what we call reimbursables. There was a major federal push recently to upgrade fiber throughout the country. And so our officers were here and available to perform that service. That's listed under reimbursables.
And what is the hourly rate the utility is billed at for that?
It's either 125 or 150.
Okay.
Again, accounting for all those different things.
Right, so pretty close to a dollar for dollar compensation.
Right, absolutely.
Okay.
Including depreciation, fringe
Yes.
school guard coverage. We have a school guard who can't make it in. One officer has to stay to cover the post. Another officer has to stay to cover the patrol slot that officer's in. That makes sense. So if I'm supposed to start my shift at 8 a.m., but I have to be here, I have to come in at 7 o'clock to be on a school post, and I'm going to be there until 9. Well, then someone's going to have to stay from 8 to 9 to cover my day. Sick coverage, again, we'll talk more about special events. Pretty self-explanatory. Tour coverage, I know some of these things sound redundant, and in some cases, the numbers aren't redundant, but the categories might be. And then training. If we have our instructors come in and do, like just talk about the firearms recertification, we have 1 or 2 instructors will come in and be here for the day, and that'll be
So what does tour coverage mean as compared to all these other categories?
So part of the issue, and again, there's no redundancy of the numbers, it's a redundancy of the categorization. Remember a few reports ago, I tried to clarify. Tour coverage is basically the catch-all for any time there's a hole in the schedule. We only have 2 people working. We're going to fill that in, and we'll talk a little bit about how we make the schedule. We'll do that again quickly, just so it's clear. Tour coverage, at the beginning of the month, we know we have 10 shifts of overtime because we don't have enough personnel to cover all those shifts. That would be tour coverage.
Vacations, whatever.
Yes.
So those are tours being covered, not because someone is sick.
So there is, I'll say this. So as far as sickness is concerned, if you divide that number, that sick number by 8, that does not equal the number of sick days that were taken by members of the department. It's more because some of those sick days do get brought in as tour coverage based on the circumstance. If somebody is out long, like he's going to be out sick for 3 weeks. Somebody having a surgery or something, they're going to be out for an extended period of time. It might go in as sick in the beginning, but it'll probably be covered as tour.
So, and there could be
It's all
some
the
wow
same.
and flutter, but the numbers are accurate.
Right. And when we talk, we'll
Okay,
we
that's
build
fine.
a category of just of those types of situations. So we broke it down into 3 different overtime categories. Personnel coverage, exactly what we're talking about. Whatever the reason is that we don't have enough people to cover a shift, it falls under the umbrella of personnel coverage. Second is department needs. There'll be a list coming up in a second of what we consider department needs. And last is reimbursable. So 8% of our overtime budget this year was reimbursable. Say that's relatively significant, but definitely again not going to get us back to the black. So first, breaking down personnel coverage. I know it's extremely hard to see, but admin leave coverage, we included it here. Like I said, although it is not necessary because it is paid, because the coverage is paid out, but again, it doesn't represent a leave in the technical term. It's more of a shifting of the schedule in the vast majority of cases. Bereavement coverage, which was very minimal, it usually is, and then personal days and sick days. What it really comes down to is when we know about how far in advance it's going to to be known. If a pipe bursts at somebody's house at 8 o'clock in the morning and they're supposed to be in work at 4, and they call up and they say, I need to take a personal day today, that's probably gonna go in as personal day coverage. But if I look ahead to the schedule and I realize I'm working 4 to 12 the night before Thanksgiving, and I have my whole family coming into town and I put in for my personal day, that's probably gonna be listed as full coverage. So, again, in the end, same thing. That's why we're much more comfortable at this point, sort of piling all of those groups of leave into things. Because here's the other situation. If we have 3 people working a shift, if we have 4 people working a shift, and somebody takes a personal day and somebody falls out sick, is it a personal day or is it sick coverage? Right? It starts to become a little bit confusing.
Doesn't add any real information to
Correct.
drive yourself nuts over.
So here's the list of department needs, things like casework, court security, discovery, field training, hearings and trials. Oh, thank you.
Whoops, sorry.
As long as it's far away, I can read it. Just close the what's it. Just roll a little bit more to the right.
Oh, sorry.
There we go. Hearings and trials, prisoner transport, special events, training, and school guard coverage. This category is basically, doesn't matter how many people we had. If we had a full complement of staff, we're still going to have these needs to fill. Potentially, we might be able to do certain things. For instance, a special event, let's say. If we had 4 people working the day of the music festival, would we potentially assign one person on straight time who's working the regular shift, and instead of answering calls, would be down on the field? It's possible. So there's always the possibility that more staff would reduce some of these numbers, but in general, we should normally anticipate that these things are going to create overtime. There are things that happen outside the scope of an officer's regular duties. And again, that goes back, total there, 1,923 hours. So we've talked in previous meetings about 10%. That 10% of payroll is a reasonable number for overtime. I bring this up in this section just to point out. So if we figure out 10% of our payroll roughly works out to 2,563 hours. Our department needs alone represent 1,923 hours. That would leave roughly 640 hours for shift coverage, which is 80 shifts. Last year, we did 550 or 560 shifts, covers 560 shifts total. So things like accrued time, and things like that. I understand the idea of the 10%, but the scope of sort of how we operate under things makes that number a little bit. The 27% sounds extremely high when you compare it to the 10%, but there are other factors that are involved. Okay, next. Just want to touch on that because I know it's here's our reimbursables, 537 hours total. Governor's traffic safety grants. We included OTR coverage in there because again, it is somewhat reimbursable. We're not paying out of pocket necessarily for that. We've already paid out of pocket for the special events or tour coverage or whatever else. And then of course, that big reimbursable block, that big fish there, that was paid directly out as we've already discussed. So when we started doing this, I wanted to look at the fiscal year. So I looked at it as a yearly project, and I quickly realized that that didn't have the level of detail that we needed to really drill down on this. The big reason is because we've experienced so many personnel changes. And although personnel changes, people leaving, people coming, people being transferred into different locations is a normal course of business. As I've said many times, as we're swearing people in or promoting them, the number of personnel changes that we've had in the last 2 years or so is, if not unprecedented, it's definitely in the non. So this is just a variety of personnel changes that we've experienced the last year, and we'll see in a minute how each one of these is impacted. I don't think I need to go through this, but basically we've hired 3 people, we've done some promotions, we've done some retirements.
Okay.
So briefly, we've discussed this before. This is what our yearly schedule looks like. You look on the top left there, you see all the officers. This has spots for 5 patrol sergeants, 13 patrol officers. that number is significant because our work chart is basically 18 days long, 4 days on, 2 days off, 4 days on, 2 days off, 4 days on, 2 days off.
Can I ask one question? And obviously, we don't have any independent control over this, and it's something that needs to be negotiated with the PBA. And at one point, a test example of it in the end didn't hold. But is there any interest in 12-hour shifts? And if we had 12-hour shifts, would that change the complexion of this analysis?
So I would say that an expert on 12-hour shifts would probably say yes, but they did change the analysis. I would say that the reason 12-hour shifts didn't work here, see, the good thing about 12-hour shifts is you only have to be here basically every other day. Nobody's here we don't scatter the schedule that way, but instead of 243 days, which is what our current contract calls for the officers to be here, it's 180, 182 or whatever. So there's far more days off. The problem that we found here was that when you're working, when you have 2 or 3 days, even if it's only 2 or 3 days and you're working before you're off, you don't see your family. You have to be to work at 7 in the morning, and you're not getting home until 8 o'clock at night, 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. And so our officers here participate, they coach their kids' team, they're active with their kids and in their communities. And so it became very difficult for officers to say, yes, I know I have 3 days off coming up, but these 3 days, I have too many things going on. And so with 12-hour shifts, it's a very limited number of people who you can get when you need to switch. One of the other things that we do here, we allow very freely, are mutual tour changes. If I'm working a day tour, Mr. Vinjamori is working 4 to 12 and it works for us, we just switch our tours. That's not a big deal. It becomes extremely difficult to do that when those are 12-hour shifts.
All right, I didn't mean to derail the
No,
conversation, but the short version of that is that it's a conversation that is a non-starter at the moment.
12-hour shifts here in the village is culture.
Okay.
So just briefly on this, so it's an 18-hour cycle or an 18-day cycle. That's why we have 18 positions in the yearly schedule. Like I said, this analysis did not work at a yearly basis. We had to do it month by month. So next, please. This is what our monthly schedule would look like if all the shifts were filled. Every slot, if we had 18 officers in patrol, same 5 sergeants, same 13 patrolmen. If you look down like on the first, Sergeant A is commanding officers 1, 2, and 13 on the 4 to 12. 1 is a midnight, 2 is a day tour, 3 is a 4 to 12. And so if no one's on vacation, every shift is a 4-man tour. And that's where it starts, where we're at full complement. Next. So as I said, we realized we had to do a monthly analysis to match up sort of the different personnel changes that we had. You'll see in June, roughly every month we have, for the purposes of this analysis, we assumed 14 officers. But if you look, there are a couple months where we were down to 13. And again, we'll touch back on this chart again in a moment. The other important thing to do here is, you do go through the math and realize we have 3,285 shifts, 365 days times 3 officers times 3 shifts, 3,285 that we need to fill. Going through, and again, these are approximates. Sometimes that's somebody would be moving in the middle of the month, moving out in the middle of the month. But let's say for best case scenario, in June, we have 14 employees, 14 officers in patrol working roughly 20 days a month on that schedule. If you add that up, that's 3,380 days. If you then take out the vacation days, we're already assuming that we're going to be paying over. You subtract the vacation days from the number of shifts, and it's below the 3,285 that we're going to know to cover every year. And again,
But just to be clear, that doesn't necessarily mean we'd be better off with more employees. There's a balance there. In some circumstances, you're better off paying overtime than you would be to take on the all-in cost, which marches up over the years of another employee.
So you should have said spoiler alert before you said that. That's where we're going.
Yes,
And again,
just trying to warm up for it.
yes, no, so listen. I believe that this presentation I was tasked with explaining how it is that we got to what are, at least in my understanding, unprecedented numbers of overtime. And I'll show you how we got there. Whether or not we need to do something to avoid that in the future, we should all realize what the ramifications of our
Absolutely.
decisions are, but you know, how many people we hire and here we go is definitely a conversation for all of us. Okay, so I just picked one month at random. I picked May, it was the most recent month of the year. And this is what our schedule actually looks like. So blue are the sergeants, the highlighted blue. Yellow is vacation relief. We have 4 officers who we do not give them their schedule any more than a week in advance of the month. And then they have their schedules flexible and we can fill them in. We have some rules about what we can and can't do with them, but there's nothing saying you can't work a day tour on Tuesday, get off at 4 in the afternoon, and we'll see you in 8 hours for a regular scheduled shift, midnight on Wednesday. We do that plenty of times. So 3 officers, those are the officers in yellow, and since blue and yellow make green, the vacation relief sergeant is highlighted in green. So, so this is before we put those officers in. So if you remember what the full complement looked like, where all those numbers were filled in and there were no blank spaces, this is where we started. The B is vacation. So you see, Officer 2 took a little bit of vacation in the middle of the month, as did Sergeant B. TR is training. And I don't see any other anomalies in there. So then we go through and what Lieutenant Bill Martin does is a week before the month, he issues the monthly schedule with the vacation relief officers filled in. Next, please. This year, it looked like that. So if you look on the bottom, you see now there's all the highlighted sections are filled in. If you look on the bottom, you'll see where the overtime is. So when Sergeant A took vacation 11, 12, 13, and 14, 3 of those shifts had to be covered with overtime. We did have on the bottom, if you look at the red, we did have some situations where we had 4 officers working. And it's up to Lieutenant Bill Martin to do his best to avoid having too many people on one shift while we're paying overtime on another. Sometimes you look at it and you say, well, why wouldn't? And then when you go into it's a bear. I'll just say it takes months to get used to it, to doing the schedule. Sometimes you can do it and come up with X number of days of overtime. You can start all over, do it again, come up with the same number of days of overtime, but they're completely different days.
Have
There's
you
a
tried
lot.
feeding all this into Chat GPT? I'm not kidding, actually.
I mean, it's one of those things where we're confident that what we're doing is utilizing our resources the best that we can, but some of the rules that we have in place and some of the things that we need to do, we're still inevitably in many situations going to end up with some overtime. This obviously, all of those numbers you see on the bottom, the highlighted boxes, not the red highlight, the other blank boxes, those are the overtime shifts for the month. And
So nothing crazy.
no, this is a very simple.
Right.
This is a good month to pick to show that. So that's okay. So this is now the extended version of that chart that we saw before. Again, same days of the month, same number of officers working per, but now we mixed in a couple other things. So we mixed in the number of vacation days that was there previously, number of days that we have officers in training, we call those school days. And then at the end, if you look, the days to cover in the monthly schedule. So when we just did May, there were 10 days to cover at the end of the schedule. That varies from month to month. Sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't, but there's always a reason for it. We go to the next slide, please. So we talked about how high the numbers in Q4. So let's highlight Q4 then. October, November, and December. We had 14 officers, which is typical, which is our average number of officers. However, at the end of the month, if you look, those were our 3 highest by far, 3 highest amount of overtime months in the year. And so what is the driver? Either November or December, we had, as we would expect, a lot of vacations being taken around the holidays. And October, although we didn't have a lot of vacation days, we had 2 officers in that 3-week supervisors. And so they immediately come out of the schedule. We have to cover those shifts. So for that 3-month period, whether it was vacations or schools, we had holes in the schedule that we needed to fill in. Next, please. Okay, and again, so here's that same chart that we started with in the previous part of the conversation. again, the numbers are trending down. None of these numbers include the last officer who we hired and who came on field training to begin of August and who was now going to also be covering shifts and pulling that total down. So I am hopeful. If history has been a guide and things do not go sideways, we don't have any unexpected things, I would expect that our Q3 overtime, although we will have some special event overtime in there, and we will have some other things in there. The tour coverage aspect, we expect to continue to back decline. If you look at the beginning, back in 2021 even, and that's COVID times and everything else, we were still floating between 800, 900, 700 hours of overtime. We would love to potentially get back to that. Okay, and just that concludes, I don't know if anybody has any other comments or questions in regards to last year's overtime.
So, you've got all employees on deck, sergeants, detectives, and officers. You're still saying, absent somebody blows out a knee, whatever it is, the system is built to require some overtime. I mean, there's never a way to avoid that. Right?
So there's never a way.
Well, because
You can give
overtime
me-
is surge capacity, so either you build the whole system so that you have officers sitting around 80% of the time, or you build it so that you.
Well, I would say that as much as we do, but
No, I'm saying like, either we hire extra officers
that's
and then they're not fully employed,
so.
or we have overtime.
Last year was the time where enough things happened. So we've always been, I've been here publicly having this conversation, that we've kept our personnel numbers relatively lean, right? What that does is it takes away the cushion. Unfortunately, we had a number of occurrences that happened in this last year where we could have used the cushion a lot more than potentially in other years.
Right.
When there weren't so many variables that were.
And some of the transitions produced that lower than budgeted base salary.
Correct.
Because you had some holes in this, and of
Absolutely.
course, the whole civil service system is enough to cause reasonable people to be driven to distraction. Thank you, Alyssa, for maintaining a stable demeanor throughout this. It's as many years as I've heard these presentations and as many years as you and your predecessors have made them, there is no magic answer.
No. So there's no number of officers you could give me that I would get to 0 hours work. There's none. We are living somewhere in that middle area where the decision is not, do we hire 3 or 4? The decision is, do we hire 1?
Yeah.
Listen, the officers like working. They appreciate the opportunities for overtime. So it's not as if at this
I mean, they
point
get
now-
unhappy if there isn't any.
correct.
So, but can I ask, do you think, since the focus on responsive policing for folks with special needs and many other aspects of humane policing have generated the need for more training, do you think, are we spending more training hours, say, these past 2 years than we used to? And are we at a level that feels like we're doing enough in a world where there's never enough? But what would you say about that?
So if you look at the training that we do participate in, it tends to fall into active shooter response, persons with disabilities in the community, dealing with persons with disabilities, and officer well-being. Those are sort of our 3 goals. Now, there are other things that are invariably going to come up and we're going to have to do. But like I said, part of this overtime number comes up on decision. What do we focus? That's our
Yeah, I
job as
understand.
managers, is to
Right.
sort of.
And when you have an officer who goes to a train the trainer kind of a program, when that person comes back and is in a position to share this with the rest of the, with his or her colleagues, is that a specified training time? People go downstairs and sit around a table, or is that more anecdotal in the course of the workday? How does that?
It depends on what.
I guess
what our-
it's both,
What our
right?
needs are, right, so we have, as you may or may not know, we have 4 training days a year. This year, we'll use 2 of them for firearms. We'll put other things in there like CPR and other things like that on those 2 training days.
Mhm.
We're gonna have a training day coming up for the use of the body worn cameras. Any of the officers who were not participating in the rescue task force training that we did at the schools will need to stay and do that training as well. And then we expect we'll have 1 more training day. We're attempting to use that again, because we have a unique opportunity to potentially do an active shooter training. So sometimes the biggest hurdle towards training is either I'm gonna have to pay the officer to come in on overtime to do it, or I'm gonna have to pay somebody else to cover the officer while he goes on.
Right. Understood.
So,
So when you schedule the monthly duty shifts that you've been showing us, obviously they change during the month because, you know, of the things that come up on a particular day. But when you're scheduling them, you basically have a series of constraints you're working with. I know so-and-so can't work on certain days or a particular day this month that they've let me know in advance. So-and-so prefers this shift. This is the general pattern. And when you're incorporating all of those things, are you doing this sort of manually and trying to figure out what lays out, or do you have
no, it's
programming?
extremely manual. So one of the good things, again, this is a little deeper in the weeds, but great question. One of the good parts about not getting your schedule, except for a week before the month starts. So if I'm vacation or leave, I find out what I'm working September 1st, on August 23rd.
Right.
The good thing about that is that you can go to Lieutenant Gilmar and say, hey, listen, if you can, I have a wedding. If you can't, you can't, and I have to use my food time, that's fine, or I have to get
Right.
pictures, that's fine. But potentially you have some flexibility. Some officers, like you said, not completely, but many officers like to take their vacation on midnight shifts. You're gonna get a week off, and we'll get a week off, and you're supposed to be up in the middle of the night. If you like working midnight shifts, and you want to stay on vacation leave, because you're gonna get less day tours and more midnights. So the application of those decisions is an extremely manual process. It's delivered for every single officer, every single shift.
I asked you this for a specific reason. So I've worked on this kind of problem in the private sector. Something like running a refinery where you have to figure out based on certain inputs, certain issues with transportation, what's required downstream, what the refinery capacity is, and then, you know, what the demand is for the different products. You have to continually decide what you're gonna boil in a refinery. It's a big boil, right? And the way that you do that outside, it was done manually for years, but the way that you actually do that more effectively is use a linear program, which basically says you define what the constraints are, and then you solve it for 1 or 2, 3 things you're trying to reduce the number of overtime hours overall, while making sure that each officer has an opportunity to get X number of hours and making sure that all of these other things are put in. I was slightly joking before, but I actually do think that the large language models now could probably do some of this for you quicker.
So we obviously be welcome to incorporating more technology into our operations to make them more efficient. The good thing is that when we do this, like I said, the bigger rules aren't necessarily when they work, but how much they work, right? We can't have them work 6 days in a row out of 7. So you know those types of things.
Right.
So that type of simple rule that then leads to a result. I mean, we would definitely do it. The one good thing I would say is when we issue the schedule, the officers invariably work. I mean, maybe they get on a short month, 19 days instead of the 20, or 18 days instead of, you know, the expected number. There might be, because we had to break them up to cover overtime shifts all over the schedule. We had to give them days off in different places. But I don't know that it becomes an efficiency thing, because at the end of the month, if all the officers are working 20 hours, I don't know that we're going to find more savings there. But as far as workload, absolutely.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just a matter of if you optimize it, you get more people. individual requests that they ask for. You manage more of those things. We can talk offline.
Sounds great. All right, so the other thing we were gonna talk about was accreditation. We're continuing with our accreditation. At this point, what we've done is we've created an accreditation schedule. I use accreditation, and that is what we are going for, and that is the final goal. However, we are doing accreditation differently than a lot of other places do. We are going to look at every single one of our policies and procedures, make sure they're updated, make sure they're accurate, make sure they include what they should. And then in the process of that, include whatever the accreditation standards are. So this is not just, okay, we need to make sure that our fiscal policy says X, let's put a line into that fiscal policy and make sure that it works. We're going to touch every single one of the policies. So policies that have no bearing on accreditation whatsoever, that no accreditation assessor will ever look at, we're still going to take the opportunity to look. Big part of that is because we're now using an online software that manages all of our policies. So it should be much cleaner and easier. And also because we really want to create a culture of compliance. And a culture of compliance, in my opinion, built when officers are comfortable opening the book and looking at it. They'll only do that if they know that what they're opening the book to is relevant. So we have to make sure that we maintain the relevancy of those documents. So there's a little bit more into it than accreditation calls for, but we think it's a valuable process. So we created 12 different groups. We those groups out, basically trying to come up with an equal amount of workload. We assessed each policy based on how much work we think it would take to get it up to speed, rough estimation, and then we more or less said, okay, what's it going to look like? Let's put these all together. So 12 groups. We gave ourselves 2 months for each group. I can guarantee you we're going to need more time than that. This process will not, I can't imagine this process being done in 2 years, but we are well on our way. We've established weekly meetings where we all get together. We come in, we'll read the policies that we're reviewing. There may be 8 of them, there might be 15 of them, depending on how extensive they are. We go through, we start having conversations. We use the online platform to amend these policies. We've already updated a few and issued a few of them. But I'm assuming that we're going to go beyond 2 months on some of these policies. Next.
And this is the biggest piece of Eric Berry's life.
No, this is it's becoming a major piece of his life. Let's put it that way. He's really far too busy, especially with all the other things that we have going on with body cameras coming in. So the problem with the body cameras is I'm not comfortable having sergeants doing body camera work. I believe and a lot of other departments feel the same way, that should be lieutenant or higher who's reviewing body cameras and doing all that work. But if now I'm pushing that onto the 2 lieutenants, there's going to be more push for that. So he is, let's put it this way. We built the groups, started off with, we're easing into it. I'm not saying easing into it as far as workload is concerned, but I want us to get muscle memory before we start to move up to the big ones. So we're moving forward, but he will be the driving force in our accreditation, 100%.
So accreditation is a goal, but then also part of this goal is to have updated policies and procedures, meaning that when somebody does something within your department, they do it the same way as everybody else does, and you decided how they're going to do that, right?
Correct.
So my question is, how much of that relates to things that people do in the field, as opposed to things people are doing in the headquarters?
Yeah, our policies and procedures touch on every aspect of what we do. How many of them will actually, I would maybe a third or a half.
Okay, so for those things, then, is it the expectation that they'll go out and they'll do a traffic stop of some variation that they've never encountered before, and get through it and then come back and look up what the procedure is and how they should have done that as a learning thing? Or are you expecting that they stop and they realize, oh, this is an out of state something rather that I've never dealt with, and then they're able to somehow look that up? And how does that work exactly?
So a couple things, the things that we do regularly, routinely on a daily basis,
You know.
That's training, that's
Yeah.
not necessarily policy. And it's experience, and,
Right.
you know, one of the things that we're always constantly looking for is opportunities to recognize where the officer on the street is doing something he's not.
Right.
That is not exactly the way we work. So, you know, normally what we'd like to create is a resource for officers, not necessarily, hey, listen. I would love for officers to go in and routinely read these things, because I still go back and just review the policy. And that's right. Yeah, and I've been off the road for a while, but oh yeah, that's right. This is in the policy. We do have that.
Right.
So there is definitely a sense of having a touchstone that you can go back to if necessary. But, you know, we have, let's say we pull over a driver and they're holding all sorts of different, they claim diplomatic immunity. We have a policy on diplomatic.
Right. Right.
29 years, never once has anybody ever claimed diplomatic immunity on a traffic stop.
But
Maybe
it
the
happens
officer
in the
checks it
area,
on the
right?
road,
Yeah.
maybe he calls for backup, or he calls the desk.
Yeah.
And says, hey, this is what I've got, and then the guy on the desk goes, hold on, wait a second, you've got a policy for that. And he goes through and he.
So I was just, yeah, because I guess the thing, it would be nice if you don't go through 2 to 3 years of work to create a manual that nobody reads again until the next time you have to do something like this.
Correct.
Is there a mobile reference or is it just
No, it's online.
okay,
Okay. And the other
Through
part too
this
is,
third party that we've engaged.
yes,
right,
the other parts of what you're saying though is, you know, we can't just start and go all the way through and then think we're done.
Yeah.
You know, if we touch a policy in September of this year and in December of this year, a law passes or best practice is discovered, and we have to go back and change that policy, then we have to go back and change that policy too, because it's not just, you know, all of our policies are currently dated 2015. They were perfectly fine, 2015, and over time, they're just not.
Mhm.
So many of them have been updated, all of our procedures have been updated. As far as how we do certain things, but they need to be memorialized. That's where we talk about that code of compliance. They know that those policies are still relevant, they'll be much more likely to go back.
okay, sorry for the diversion.
It's just to remind us in general, an average like neighboring towns or villages. Can you name many that have already been accredited or are working on the same as us or
Sure.
hearing this?
So, many of the, our surrounding agencies are accredited, Mount Pleasant's accredited, I believe Newcastle's accredited, the county is accredited. I know Rye Brook is, I know Dobbs Ferry is. The town of Mamaroneck is going through the procedure right now, they're farther along than we are. Try to just think who I've talked to about the process. But obviously during and after police reform, agencies that may be considered accreditation as a lofty goal or something for the next guy, recognize that it was responsible to be working on it.
Thank you.
Sure. And then just the previous slide was just sort of the working group that we've assembled to work on that. Like you said, we have our accreditation manager, who's our administrative sergeant, who is instrumental to that group. And we also thought it was wise to bring in our union representative. You know, our current detective sergeant is also the PBA president. And so we want to make sure that we have, you know, him in the room, not only for his detective sergeant hands-on experience on how we handle investigations, but also potentially to raise any sort of questions. So this way we're not delayed by issuing a policy and then having the union come back to us and say, wait, we have an issue with this, and then we have to start over. Better to have that conversation before we do. So body worn cameras, we had hoped to get them out before the end of the summer. It looks like it might bleed into September a little bit. But the cameras are here. The policy is 99%. It's completely written, just a couple final edits and 1 or 2 other questions that have to go out, but very close. Sometime in September, the officer will be out on the project.
Great.
Our records management system, that process continues. That is, we're scheduled for a launch. That's what we're doing with Westchester County and 12 other jurisdictions, all going to the same system. Lieutenant Bill Martin spends a week at the academy, about every 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. We lose him for a week down at the academies. They go through the system administration, the training, all the decisions that have to be made.
They've settled on the product now.
Settled on the product, just making all the little decisions inside. And again, if we had done this on our own, they come in and they say, okay, what do you want? We'll go figure it out. Well, now, because we're doing this in partnership with all these other municipalities, what we want is a group discussion. Lieutenant Gilmartin has said it's been a very congenial, everybody is working towards the same group, it's not, there's no conflicts or issues or anything, you know, Westchester County, who is spearheading this and absorbing a great deal of the funding for it, has been very, partner oriented, you know, it's not like, hey, we're paying for this, so we'll make all the decisions,
Does County PD use this system themselves?
they will. We're within the first cohort.
Okay, great.
So we're still looking at a go live date, March of next year.
And is there still any lack of clarity? Does there remain a lack of clarity about the transition of existing records into the new system and how it's done, how long it takes, and who pays for it?
So there is still, to my understanding, a lack of, if a decision has been made, I don't expect a decision to be made on that one necessarily until it's time to make a decision. I think everybody is sort of has their own beliefs and that can has sort of been kicked down the road. You know, again, not to bore everybody with the details, but all of our agencies, after using the same system for 25 years, have very bad data. We all know it. We all navigate through it. We're going to all throw it in a big pile and share it with everybody else. I think we're all a little leery of doing that. So we're not going to lose any of our records. It's just a matter of how we're going to go about maintaining them. We have talked to our IT vendor, and we are confident that we, like everyone else, will be able to access all those records, but how seamlessly it integrates into the new platform.
So is the idea simply to maintain the old database in the old, now disused software and then go back to it when you need to? Or is the idea to take some backward looking period and try to import it into the new format?
Both of those are on the table. Obviously the least labor intensive would be just to store it over here. And if you want to go back and see, you know, I pull over here, I'm Peter, and I want to go run his name in our records management system and see if I've ever dealt with him before. I now have to go into a different system and do that.
Like going to the doctor now. Oh, hold it. Let me look at it.
Yeah.
Oh, I got to go into the old EMR.
So that's still to be determined. Like I said, there's a lot of logistics. Obviously, we would love to just roll it right over and everything is there, but we recognize that probably.
All right. So you'll keep us up to date as that
Absolutely.
evolves.
And then lastly, our radio communications project is continuing. We have a meeting this week with finance and with the village administrator to talk about getting the ball rolling on the first steps that are necessary to secure the payment for the equipment that we're going to need. The numbers have remained steady. We haven't seen a jump in the numbers since we really started. We're constantly assessing exactly what it is we're going to need to be relevant. They did change vendors just recently, literally 2 weeks ago. I got an email from the new guy who we're going to deal with, but that's fine. We're okay with that.
All right. Well, keep us up to date. That's like $250,000.
No,
How much more?
it's like it's the number we're using is 300,000.
Okay,
That's the last slide.
it is. Thank you for that. All right, Chief. I thank you for this thorough presentation. Lots of food for thought. And I certainly, I'm sure I can speak on behalf of all of us to say these quarterly presentations are great, not only for us, but for the community at large. And I know it's not a small venture to put them together, and it's much appreciated.
Sure. Thank you very much. I appreciate the back and forth.
Okay, thank you, Chief. All right, we have no one in the room. If there's anyone online who is interested in raising their hand and making a comment of any sort, please raise your hand in Zoom and we will enable you to speak. No one has done so. All right. I just had a couple of other quick announcements to make. As you already heard, perhaps if you listened in the work session, the annual block party, Paul Alvarez, in his dual role as a trustee and vice president of the Chamber of Commerce, is the major domo of the block party Saturday, September 23, with a rain date of the following Saturday, September 30.
Correct.
More on that, and you'll have marketing stuff out and
Correct.
social media, Chamber of Commerce website? What
Yes,
do you think?
a lot of them, you want to follow the Chamber of Commerce, you can sign up for a newsletter, you'll get a lot of information on that. For any vendors that are interested, please reach out to us. We're going to be sending out a specific email address for this event. And, we're open to any suggestions anyone has, and we look forward to seeing it.
All right, our Manville Road pedestrian conditions project is about to kick into gear again. We've been waiting for the arrival of the streetlights that are required for the reconfigured corner at Grand Street and Manville Road. There have been some bumps in the road in terms of getting the supply and getting the contractors lined up and getting DOT, the Department of Transportation, that is, to agree to some last minute details, but we're still thinking that we'll see that work kicking into gear pretty soon with the idea of completing it before the snow flies. This will include closing of the slip lane, that elbow exit from the commuter side of Memorial Plaza, and reconfiguring the corner at Grant Street between the War Monuments and Valvoline to include a dedicated right turn lane. So fairly significant changes going on there, which you will see kicking into gear soon. And then the other thing I wanted to note, the county's been putting out quite a bit of information on battery fires, both here in Westchester County and even more severe problems in New York City with lithium ion batteries in various kinds of appliances causing fires, in particular things like scooters and motorized boards and the like, but also not as big batteries, but it's a concern for anything that has a rechargeable battery, including laptops and the like. Some of these batteries are fire risks, especially if they're close to something flammable and get too close to things and the airflow around them is limited. If a battery fire starts in something like an electric scooter, those battery fires are extraordinarily difficult to put out. So county has quite a bit of information out about that, and we'll be pushing it out further, but just be aware that anything that has a rechargeable battery is a potential fire hazard, and the bigger the battery, the bigger the risk. So folks should be very careful to pay attention to the batteries, make sure that when things are charging, they are charging with airflow around them. We had, for example, a couple of years back, a fire that took place in somebody's bedroom because a laptop was charging on the bed and it had gotten covered up by blankets and eventually caused a fire. But it's a very serious concern. If you have anything that has bulging batteries, swelling batteries, some sign of problem like that, stop using it and get it repaired. So
Is that only true when they're holding or accepting energy, like old batteries that are dead? Are they a risk also or not?
I'm hardly the guy that would know for sure, but I believe that first off, old batteries should be properly recycled, not the ones AA, single A, that sort of things, which at the moment are thrown out the household trash. But anytime you have a battery from a computer, from a power pack, from a removable batteries in flashlights and the like that can be recharged, those should be properly recycled. The county has a hazardous waste site in Valhalla. You can make an appointment to go there. As it happens in the course of my recent garage cleaning, have an appointment on Saturday to get rid of some old stuff in the garage, including pesticides and turpentine and things of that kind. Anyone who lives in Westchester in the communities that are served by the Westchester Sanitation District, Pleasantville being one of them, can avail themselves of taking all that stuff to the Valhalla site with an appointment at no charge. There are a few communities that are not included in the county sanitation system, and folks from those communities incur a charge, but in Pleasantville, it is free. So you can get rid of all kinds of stuff. It's available on the county website to both to make an appointment and to describe the stuff you can get rid of. But it is important for folks to realize that batteries, especially lithium ion batteries, are a potential risk. And there have been a bunch of truly tragic events in New York City, and they're having several hundred fires a year from improper storage of electric bikes and the like. So,
No, I was specifically asking because I know a bunch of people who never, they put their old laptops in particular in their garage because of data privacy concerns.
mhm.
They don't want to recycle them and have the drives, exposed to a third party.
Mhm.
And I don't know if that's a risk or not.
I don't know the answer for sure. I'm guessing that a depleted battery in a garage is not much of a risk.
Mhm.
But I will also say, having been in that circumstance, business information, whatever, if you're not confident that you have wiped the drive, you can unscrew the back and take the drive out. That's harder to do in some of the later model devices where everything's glued together, but I will say that in the long haul, you don't want to be accumulating a lot of dead batteries in your garage. All right, anybody else have an announcement of any kind to make? All right, with that, to the resolutions, let me share my screen. Okay, 279, Paul.
Result, the Board of Trustees hereby approves the minutes of the regular meeting held on July 24th, 2023.
Is there a second? Second. Comments or corrections to the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved, 280.
Resolve the Board of Trustees hereby approves the following budget amendments for fiscal year ending 2023 as of May 31st, 2023, as listed below. $62 from ordinance updates to legal notices, $675 from finance outside services to library contractual. Total of, the total doesn't look right there.
It's gotta be 62 plus 675, isn't it?
Yes, sorry, we changed it.
Okay, so that'll be 737.
I agree.
Then $5,734.50 from sidewalk program 50/50 program to capital sidewalk project.
Is there a second?
Second.
So there's a reconciliation of accounts at the end of our fiscal year. FYE 2023 is fiscal year ending 2023, which was as of May 31. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved, 281, Paul.
Result, the Board of Trustees hereby approves the abstract payment of claims dated August 14th, 2023 for the fiscal year of 2023, covering check numbers 10832 through 10835. General fund, $4,178 for a total of $4,178. Description of these claims are attached to this resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
So again, this is the relatively minor amount of stuff paid for items in the previous fiscal year. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. 582, David.
Resolved, the Board of Trustees hereby approves the abstract of payment for claims dated August 14th, 2023 for fiscal year ending 2024, covering check numbers 108-106 to 108-351 from the general fund, $526,437.63. Special $225 from the water fund, $198,933.93. Capital $26,667.05. Refuse fund $38,479.94 for a total of $790,743.55. The payment of claims is attached.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comments or questions on the payment of
It's
claims?
a bigger one, huh?
Yes, right. Only wish they were like the previous one every time. All in favor? Aye, motion approved. 283, Paul.
Result, the Board of Trustees hereby accepts the resignation of George Pappas, village prosecutor, effective August 4th, 2023. Resignation letter attached to this resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
So George Pappas is retiring in the state retirement system. It's his intention to come back and work for us on the same part-time basis that he works now, but as a retiree, which he is entitled to do. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion approved. 284, David.
Resolve the Board of Trustees hereby accepts the resignation of Alexander Sensata, Recreation Assistant, Panther Club, effective June 22nd, 2023.
Is there a second?
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion approved, 285. Paul.
result the Board of Trustees hereby accepts the resignation of Carolyn Casarella, Recreation Assistant, Panther Club, effective June 23rd, 2023.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved, 286. David.
Resolve the Board of Trustees hereby approves a request from Holy Innocents Parish to close the Tompkins Avenue parking lot to public parking on Sunday, September 10th, 2023, from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. and Sunday, October 8th, 2023, from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. for the purposes of a parish special event.
Is there a second?
Second,
As I always do, remind the public that parking lot is actually owned by Holy Innocents, and the public use of it is part of an agreement we have with Holy Innocents, where certain of the spaces are identified for their permanent use. The rest of the spaces are available for public parking at specific times. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved, 287.
result the Board of Trustees hereby waives the 30-day requirement to local municipalities for an amended liquor license application by John Jocks New York LLC at 468 Bedford Road to the State New York Liquor Authority.
Is there a second?
Second.
We've routinely waived the 30-day requirement in circumstances where we don't have an opinion on an application of this kind. No reason to make an applicant wait further for a resolution with New York State Liquor Authority. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved, 288.
Resolve the Board of Trustees hereby accepts the resignation of Candace Crowley, Recreation Assistant, Panther Club, effective June 23rd, 2023.
Is there a second?
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved, 289. Back to Paul.
result the Board of Trustees hereby approves the hiring of the following part-time recreation assistants, job code 269, Diana Sierra Mella, for a rate of $22 effective August 25th, 2023. Panther Club, a 7330.101. Thomas Muncy, $22 rate per hour effective August 25th, 2023. Panther Club, a 7330.101, and Brianna Rivers for a rate of $22 per hour, August 25th, 2023, effective date for the Panther Club, a 7330.101.
Is there a second?
Second.
Welcome Diana, Thomas, and Brianna. Pleased to add to the list since we just went through a bunch of resignations. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. That is the last of our regular agenda items. Anybody have new business or a comment to make?
I move that we end the meeting and go back into work session.
I think that's a good move. I see no raised hands among our attendees on Zoom. So with that, is there a motion to adjourn and return? There isn't a motion to adjourn and return to work session. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. Thank you all for your attention, either now or on demand webcast at pctv76.org. We will be back before you 2 weeks from today, which is Monday, August 28th. Work session at 7, regular meeting at 8. Among the matters to be discussed in work session tonight is how we may need to adjust our meeting schedule in September. Stay tuned on that. Good night. Thank you. All right. So we're still on Zoom, but we're back to Panther Club scholarship discussion.
What's the interest level?
When I talked to Eric last, there was limited interest, right?
So
Only,
then
I believe, 1%.
let's meet it.
So then the question there to be addressed is whether that would be a full scholarship or a partial scholarship, and whether it's for the first semester or for both.
If it's only one person, I would just do, and this is somebody whose child is receiving free school lunch, meaning they're in a very low
Well,
economic.
free or reduced, right?
Which one is it?
All I information I have was that they would qualify.
Nevertheless, there are lower poverty guidelines.
Yeah,
To never to be,
Yeah.
whether it's less, whether it's free or limited, but
So, and then just to explore it, I'm not arguing against it in
Yeah.
any way, but we could in the end end up with applicants down the road in this year. So how much have we set aside as potential?
It's like 15 or something.
So that the full scholarship for 10 months is in the order of $6,000.
5,300. And how much have we set aside, you know?
We certainly get set aside more than that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, I mean, if it's, so my perspective would be if it's 10 or 15,000, then if this is the only person that wants it, let's give them a full scholarship for the half year and hold off on how much they would get for the second half of the
all right,
year.
that's agreeable.
Okay.
So we would make a commitment to the first semester in essence through the end of the year break. And then revisit it for the second semester.
The 5,300 is.
That'll be for the full year. But again, I mean, just to sort of assess whether we end up with more demand and
Yeah.
whatever. So,
Yeah, basically, we're treating this as a pool
right.
and we have no other demand for the pool in the first half,
Right.
so we'll fully
Yeah,
meet that need.
You know, I don't want to get into a situation where people perceive unfairness if
Yeah.
somebody got a full ride and then next year they don't.
Yeah.
So, all right, that seems fair. All right, done.
So that would cover, the full din was 50, how much?
5,300, that would be.
Just cutting it right in half.
It'll cover this semester and then we
It
can
may not
give
be
them the
exactly
rest.
half. I don't know, the second semester, maybe a
Yeah.
little longer than the first one.
So we'll look again, and if there's other people who've
Uh-huh.
asked, then we might reduce it, or they might get the full pay.
Okay,
I think that's
it's a good.
a good solution.
Nice.
All right. Meeting schedule for September. There are a few issues, including Yom Kippur, right?
Yes.
All right, so our regular meeting, absent any other issue, would be the 11th and the 25th.
11th is fine, right?
What day does Yom Kippur start?
That's the 24th at sundown until sundown on 25th, but
That would
at the
essentially
end of
not.
sundown, there's a meal or
that it would-
breakfast.
Right.
Yeah, so
For
people-
observant
so I
folks
wouldn't
that
be here.
couldn't participate, so. So there's nothing in the way of the 11th, is there?
No, Yom
Well, let's-
Kippur- sorry, Rosh Hashanah is the week in between.
Okay, so then what are our options? The week of the 25th. This room is used for court Tuesday.
Yes.
I have a Phelps board meeting that night
We
too.
do the 28th. We have to have it at the senior center.
Wait, we're looking at
We do like
October?
No, September.
is it possible to make it light enough to do it as a bill pass meeting, like during the day, during the week?
If we have to, I believe that's.
Or do it Wednesday night, maybe?
What about Thursday, the 21st? I say that because in October, the second Monday is the 9th, pretty early in the month. Thursday, the 21st,
It's okay with me. Yeah, the 28th is not good because there's a back to school night. But we don't have one on the 21st.
which school has back to school that night?
Sixth grade, so middle school.
Okay. What do you think about the 21st of those?
That'll work.
What do you think, Paul? If we did that, would be at the senior center or here?
Would normal starting at 7?
Yeah,
Okay, I think I could do that. I may just have to leave by 9. I'm not sure what will be going on that day, but
okay. So that seems workable.
Thursdays I usually have stuff going on, but
Is that your soccer night?
I do, and I think it's playoffs time. So
We
I can
can't
ask,
have you miss the
I
playoffs.
can
Yeah.
ask for a later game,
All right.
like at 9:30 or 10.
I mean, you're gonna be in the playoffs. I mean, there's no
Right, we
doubt
have-
about that. I mean,
So
right?
We've been working the whole season towards that.
All right.
21st is clear.
All right, so let's say then in the month of September, we're gonna meet on Monday, the 11th and Thursday, the 21st. And then the next meeting is back in October, the regular schedule, which is the 9th and the 23rd.
The 9th. That comes in.
Yes,
The
it
9th
is.
is Columbus Day.
Yes, that have to change.
Damn, there's always something. All right. So the 12th,
Well, if I can't do, I teach on, oh, shoot, actually, I can't do the other one either. I teach on Thursdays.
all right, well, we're reconsider again.
Where are we at with Wednesdays? Did we say Wednesdays wouldn't work?
Wednesday, the 20th is okay for me. And it's also Wednesday, the 27th is okay.
Yeah, the 27th is better for me.
Are we on, we're back to September?
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
back to school night on the 20th for the elementary school.
The 27th has to be at the seniors.
Which is okay. I mean,
That's okay.
So. Is it, are we having back to back because of those dates?
it's not back to back.
I'm saying back to back weeks.
Well, it wouldn't be back to back if we go to the 27th.
Gotcha. Because then
Ideally, it would have been the 11th and the 25th, but the 25th is Yom Kippur. So the 27th would be the week of the regular meeting, but on the Wednesday,
I can do that.
and that would be at the senior center, but we're all thinking it's okay. And then in October, we have the problem of Columbus Day on the 9th. In which case we could do the same thing Wednesday, the 11th,
That'll work for me.
Works for me.
same story, senior center.
No issues on my end there.
Wednesday, the 11th will be at the senior center.
So, which works out fine, I think. It's not like we're getting a crowd. I say that. You never know, right?
Let's see what's on the menu.
Okay. All right,
Okay.
so we can see whether Nicole and Michael disagree, but in the end, we know we have a quorum on those dates, and absent
Yes.
wholesale uprising, we'll call it a plan.
Yeah, in October, I'm going to Missouri, DC, Wisconsin, South Carolina, New Mexico.
Wow. You're getting around.
Yeah.
Time to buy an Airstream.
Right? That'd be fun.
All right. Anything else?
Did we need to put the open container, maybe no container on Wheeler Avenue as a,
It will be on the next one.
that's, okay.
Everything for the block party is gonna be on.
That's one, okay,
Wanted to wait to talk about it before
makes sense.
we
All right.
jump to it.
Good, thank you, I appreciate that.
All right. Thank you, Alyssa. Thank you all. Thank you, anyone who's listening now or in the future.